Patriotic Alliance questions the reason behind EFF's motion of no confidence in Nelson Mandela Bay Mayor Athol Trollip. Opposition parties expressed their dismay over the reported 20 million rand event to bid farewell to ANC Secretary General Ace Magashule. Convicted racist Vicki Malmberg to know her fate during the sentencing today. Coming up in your sport, Cricket Australia will today announce further sanctions against its trio found guilty of ball tampering, says the ball tampering scandal. Coming to you live from Johannesburg, this is Newsroom. Thank you very much for joining me. I'm Shante Yankees. Of course, what to expect in this hour, we have a look at the build-up to the EFF's motion of no confidence in Nelson Mandela Bay Metro Mayor Athol Trollip. First things first, let's have a look at your top story. Your lead story this hour, President of the Patriotic Alliance, Gayton McKenzie, says his party will not support a motion of no confidence in a man when the only apparent basis for it is that he happens to be white. McKenzie has announced that the PA will not support tomorrow's EFF motion of no confidence in the DA mayor in the Nelson Mandela Bay Metro, Athol Trollip. The EFF brought the motion following the DA's rejection of the recent bill for the land expropriation without compensation, with EFF leader Julius Malema citing Trollip's race. Asanda Ntame has the details. Of course, the Economic Freedom Fighters leader Julius Malema will address supporters in PE ahead of the party's vote of no confidence motion against DA Mayor Athol Trollip later today. Meanwhile, the Democratic Alliance supporters are expected to come out in full force at the rally in affront to the City Hall to show support for Mayor Athol Trollip ahead of the vote of no confidence tomorrow. And indeed, we will be going to that live throughout the course of the morning. Well, opposition parties are planning to boycott a function to bid farewell to ANC Secretary General Ace Magashule and welcome newly elected Free State Premier Sisi Ntobela today. Well, the Free State government has instructed government workers in Bloemfontein to leave work by 9 a.m. to attend the inauguration. Opposition parties labelled the function, which is reported to be costing around 20 million rand, as a waste of money. Well, the Free State Premier's spokesperson, Tisetso Makele, says no employee is forced to participate and no employee will be punished if they do not leave early. Well, ICASA and the country's major data network and mobile communications companies are expected to brief Parliament on the reduction of costs. South Africa is well known to be one of the most expensive countries to communicate. South Africa's high mobile data prices have been under increasing attack in the recent months. ICASA has questioned the high data costs, saying that the prices were unjustifiable and had an added heavy financial burden on the poor. Research company ICT Africa said last year that the price of data in South Africa had not changed over the preceding 2 years and is the most expensive out of all leading African economies. Some other news stories. SASSA will today give a progress report to Parliament's Social Development Committee on the Constitutional Court judgment. The Con Court gave SASSA an extension of 6 months to continue working with cash paymaster services to ensure that grants are being paid to beneficiaries. Well, the contract was due to expire on the 31st of this month. SASSA had brought an application saying it was part of its system to allow CPS to hand over the payment of grants to the South African Post Office. In 2014, the court invalidated the contract to pay social grants to 17 million beneficiaries entered into 2012. When Justice Leona Turon delivered her judgment, she warned former Social Development Minister Batabile Dlamini and acting SASSA CEO Pearl Bengu that they were not off the hook. Well, former real estate agent Vicki Malmberg is expected to be sentenced in Randburg's Magistrates Court north of Johannesburg today. Malmberg was found guilty of criminal injury in November last year. This comes after her racist rant towards police officers who were trying to assist her after a smash and grab incident. Bystanders recorded the incident and it went viral on social media. Well, in the video, she can be heard using a racial slur 48 times. Today's potentially precedent-setting decision by the court could see Malmberg become the first person in South Africa's history to be sent to jail for criminal injury. Human rights activists feel this would be a fitting punishment and act as a deterrent for others who harbour racist sentiments. Earlier, the Equality Court found Malmberg guilty of hate speech and ordered her to pay a hefty fine, a decision that she says she intends to appeal. Well, the Minister of Home Affairs, Malusi Gigaba, will outline the state of readiness on the South African border environment for the 2018 Easter period. The Easter period is one of the busiest times at South Africa's borders. The Minister will reveal South Africa's state of readiness as an influx of Lesotho nationals, Zimbabweans as well as Mozambicans who will be going home during Easter. The Bay Border Bridge post was recently in the news when an immigration official was filmed using her cell phone while serving clients. Well, the state key witness in the Colony murder trial, Bonakele Bakisi, is expected to take a stand today at the Mahikeng High Court. Bonakele is the only person who has seen firsthand what happened to Mahlomola Mosweu. He alleges that he was threatened not to report what transpired on that fateful day when Mahlomola Mosweu lost his life. The two, Peter Duravat as well as Philip Skitter, have accused Mosweu of allegedly stealing a sunflower. The accused are on trial for allegedly killing the 15-year-old from Colony in the northwest in April last year. For an update on the trial, we are now joined in our Mahikeng studio by National Prosecuting Authority spokesperson in the northwest, Frank Lesenyeho. Very good morning to you, Frank. Thank you very much for joining us. Can you give us firstly an initial update on the murder trial of Mahlomola Mosweu?
Good morning to you, and thank you for having us as NPA.
Frank, can you please give us an update with regards to the details around the case?
The trial, which has been set down from the 19th of March 2018 until 30 March 2018, has started very well in the Northwest High Court in Mahikeng. The state first witness was Dr. Ruida Morat, who is a forensic pathology specialist. She testified that in her career, she has examined between 4,000 and 6,000 bodies. She also stated to the court that in examining Mahlomola Mosweu, the deceased, she actually sustained severe external injuries. The second witness was Jeremiah Mudisani, who was in charge of the church office at the time when the two accused reported the stealing of sunflower. He testified in court, of which he was the second witness of the state. The third witness was Constable Kabi. Constable Kabi was there at the time when the ambulance picked the Mahlomola Mosweu. She testified as the third witness of the state. At this point, the person who's now standing on the box is Brigadier Clifford Karani, who is the provincial head of organized crime. If you remember very well, there was local inspection that was done 2 days ago. The local inspection was at the request of the defense because Brigadier Korani was the person who interviewed the key witness on the pointings. So the reason why the local inspection was conducted was because the defense wanted to cross-examine Brigadier Korani. So he was testified, he actually he was cross-examined yesterday at the High Court. He's still continuing with the cross-examination. So in as far as key witness testifying today, that is not true. We have no order, or we have no order in terms of who will be testifying first and who will be testifying last. But at this stage, the state has only called 4 witnesses, but we have in total 21 witnesses who are going to be testifying in this trial.
Now, we do know that Bonakele Pakisi is going to be testifying today. He's actually saying that he actually saw what happened. How crucial is his testimony going to be in this case?
Maybe let me just say that it's not true that he's testifying today. I'm not sure when he's going to be testifying, the key witness, but it's very crucial because he's the person who saw what happened on that day.
Now, of course, you mentioned the examination of the body showing that, of course, Moswe had external injuries, extensive external injuries. At this point in time, can we cross-examine that to him actually being abused or beat up, or can we cross-examine that to him actually falling out of the car, as has been brought forward by the defendants?
I think at this point, I will not be able to go into details of the testimony of the Dr. Rowida. Remember that the court must, at the end of the day, make a decision looking at the evidence that is available to the court. But she did testify and told the court that Moswe had severe external injuries. Now,
we do know that 21 witnesses are set to come forward and testify, as you just clarified now. With that being said, when can we actually expect judgment on the matter?
I think we have just begun the trial. If you remember now, it's the second week of this trial. At this point, only 4 witnesses have testified. Remember that the defense must also bring their own witnesses to come and testify. So I think we'll look at as activities unfold at the court, but I can't be giving you a straight answer of saying this will be the day of the judgment day. So we'll now allow the witnesses to testify and allow the court to do its job.
Definitely. Thank you very much for giving us some of the details there around that case. That was the National Prosecuting Authority's spokesperson in the Northwest, Frank Lesenyago. Of course, that's with regards to what was known as the sunflower case. Motlomola Moswe was killed age 15 for allegedly taking or stealing a sunflower from the defendants, Philip Skitter as well as Doravat. We will be giving you more updates on that. Moving on, business is optimistic about the youth employment service that was launched by President Cyril Ramaphosa and business and labour leaders yesterday. The initiative aims to empower 1 million young South Africans by offering paid quality work experiences over the next 3 years.
Youth unemployment contributes to the social tension and anguish experienced in South Africa on a daily basis, especially among the youth. The unemployment rate for those younger than 25 is shockingly high at 67.4%. President Cyril Ramaphosa says what was started today can be characterized as a youth employment movement. He says this is a seed of hope among the many who have given up hope of ever finding employment.
The phenomenal buy-in that we've got, the social compact that we've crafted today, is going to be the pillars of the sustainability that we want. That this is not a flash in the pan, that this is not going to happen once and disappear. And that is where the wisdom of having it over a 3-year period becomes real. Because we're going to run it for 1 year and bring in 300,000. And if we don't bring in 300,000, we will be able to double up the following year, because that's when we're going to get more and more companies to come in.
Businesses have been tasked with creating new paid one-year positions for unemployed black youth over and above the current employment numbers. Research has shown that 1 year of work experience coupled with a CV, a reference letter, increases a young person's chances of finding employment by 3 times. 100 young people will be employed at ABSA, Investec, Netcare, SASSA and Unilever through the YES program.
We can't absorb them all into the corporate sector, but the important thing is the township element. If we can create business in the township and close to people close to where they live, you really can get the thing up to scale. Also in the rural areas.
I'm hoping that with the support of NEDLAC, the Cabinet and all these constituencies, we are going to have the beginning of a process now which will grow in an unprecedented scale in the world, I might say, to employ youth gainfully in businesses, and they come out with a real work experience after 1 year. That's paid internships, and we're going to work towards ramping this up from a small beginning to 330,000.
But Labour can also play a positive role because we are also employers, and we can also take young people on. Young people on as recruiters, young people on to serve as members, because there's many people that's not members of the unions yet, and we need to grow the labour movement stronger.
For Ernst Leswalo, one of the early beneficiaries, this is just the boost he needed for his entrepreneurial spirit.
Before the Youth Employment Service opportunity came along, I was just a local boy from the township, just trying to run my own business. And then the opportunity came through, which I grabbed immediately. I didn't waste time.
Businesses wishing to participate in YES can either create additional 1 year paid work opportunities over and above their existing headcount, or sponsor a salary and support costs for a 1 year starter position at an SMME. Diabo Seto, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Well, a 32-year-old man is to serve life imprisonment for killing his 2 nieces and 2 nephews. The Pietermaritzburg High Court convicted Ben Mbele for killing the children to sell their body parts to a traditional healer. The court found that he was driven by greed and wanted to enrich himself with money and was being paid by a traditional healer for selling their body parts and an insurance claim. He was sentenced to 4 life terms that will run concurrently.
Community members from Ngugeni outside Port Shepstone came out in numbers. Ben Mbele, who is the victim's uncle, showed no remorse. The court says the murders were premeditated and found that he had ample time to change his mind and not go ahead with the crime. Mbele claimed he was influenced by his friend Sibongiseni Nyawose. Last September, Mbele visited his sister's home. The children were watching television when he attacked and killed them. He received 60,000 rand from an insurance policy.
We won't be able to stay with this kind of person in our area. Even the chief will be happy to get the news.
As a community, we are still very angry with his acts, so we won't be able to take him back to the community because of the manner he killed the children.
I'm happy with the court's decision, and it's going to be a lesson to other people who want to do these crimes.
Mbele's friend Sibongiseni Nyawose's case was provisionally withdrawn, and the traditional healer who was sold the body parts is still at large. Londi Khatebe, SABC News, Pietermaritzburg.
Well, on our question of the day, we're asking you, what do you make of the HIV testing controversy in the Eastern Cape? We do know that it had made headlines in the past couple of days of 12-year-olds actually being tested for HIV/AIDS in front of their peers, and then also the details around their status being announced. We've asked you to send us your comments on @SABC Newsroom. We'll have a look at some of your tweets and more when we come back after the break.
Nations, 44 matches live on SABC 1 and 19 SABC radio stations. SABC is the official broadcaster of the 2018 FIFA World Cup Russia.
when life takes a different turn.
If I didn't eat the speak, he was going to evict me.
Your will to persevere is ignited.
I'm not a professional speaker, but I'll try my best to give you a word of inspiration.
He was just trying to provide for his family.
If you can't accept it, change it. If you cannot change it, accept it.
And a new story begins.
Made a resolve to myself. I'm learning something new.
Upilong, every Friday at 5:30. Be part of the life-changing journey.
Well, the Reserve Bank is expected to announce a decrease in interest rates this afternoon. The latest annual inflation rate dropped to 4.0% in February from 4.4% in January this year. Economists say that the decrease may encourage the banks to cut rates. Earlier this year, former Finance Minister Malusi Gigaba announced an increase in VAT with a 1 percentage point from 14% to 15%. South Africans have been receiving SMSs notifying them of the changes in their installments starting from the 1st of April. Discussing these topics, we are now joined in studio by a wealth coach from TNC Wealth Partners, Samke Mhlongo. Very good morning to you, Samke. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, Shante.
Firstly, let's start with the interest rates from the Reserve Bank. What can we expect with regards to the rate cuts?
Well, I guess there's mixed feedback around whether the interest rate will be cut or not, because remember, the Reserve Bank looks at the 18-month forecast for inflation before deciding on which stance to take, because they don't want to be caught in a cycle where they are sort of ad hoc increasing and decreasing interest rates. So we've got good numbers coming out from our economic growth, good numbers from jobs added for Q4 2017, good numbers in terms of our inflation. The Moody's announcement last week Friday that our credit ratings, has been held steady, but not only that our outlook was revised from negative to stable. So you've got all the signals coming through that you've got a recovering economy. However, the Reserve Bank, when making their decision on whether to hike or leave interest rates unchanged or decrease them, they don't look at what's happening now, but rather where they expect inflation to be in 18 months' time.
Definitely. And let's talk about what are the other contributing factors besides that in making the decision.
Well, they look at political stability, they look at global markets as well, they look at the rand strength, and our rand has strengthened about 5% from, 20% from November, 5% for this year, and 2% last week alone on bets that we wouldn't be downgraded. So that as well would definitely have an impact, but again, it's a longer term view that they take.
All right, so Samke, let's talk VAT now. Of course, so we've all been getting those SMSs. We've all been told come April 1st, and it's not an April Fool's joke that VAT is going to be affecting everybody. So let's have a look at what are we expecting in those increases and how it's going to be affecting South Africans.
So basically, from the 1st of April, correct, as announced by former Minister Gigaba, that VAT will be increasing to 15%. And there's been a lot of reaction from people saying, oh my gosh, everything is going up, but not all your line items are going to go up with the VAT increase. So for instance, your rental or your bond installment or even your car installment, for instance, is not VATable. Okay. So that won't be increasing come 1st of April. Your car installment, you may find that the VAT on the fees will increase. So banks will have sort of a 57 Rand monthly admin fee on your car installment, and that will increase by a percentage point if it's sitting at 57 to 58 Rand, and then you'll see that you'll have a 1 Rand increase in your installment, for instance. Okay. Medical aid, yes and no in terms of it being VATable. So your medical aid premiums aren't VATable, but medication and your services can do incur VAT. And what the medical aid schemes are doing is that a lot of them are absorbing these up until the medical aid premium renewals next year, because they're not allowed to actually hike medical aid premiums without approval from the Medical Council scheme. Okay. So a lot of people will receive emails from their medical aid saying that we are absorbing the effect of VAT. It's not your medical aid being nice to you. They have little choice in that regard. And what to watch out for is that next year when premiums do go up, they'll actually go up by a little bit more than that 9% sort of annual average increase in medical aid premiums because they'll be recouping what they've spent on that.
Okay, let's look at groceries. I mean, that's an 18 Rand different. That's quite bigger than that's a jump compared to the other expenses that we're seeing there.
Correct, because in your grocery basket, there are only 19 items that are non-vatable, and research done into the average middle-class South African's basket of goods, we found that in only about half of the products that are non-vatable would make up your typical basket of goods. So what products are not vatable? Eggs, milk, bread, sugar definitely is vatable and taxable. Your meat is fresh produce, so your vegetables aren't. Pilchards aren't, maize meal and rice aren't, but everything else absolutely vatable. So you can expect that sort of typical increase if you're spending about 1,800 on your groceries per month.
Yeah, and then who are we really expecting to be affected by VAT? Do you think that all South Africans across the board, regardless of your level of income or class, are going to be affected quite significantly?
Everyone will be affected in varying degrees. So if you've got your poorer South Africans, that spend the majority on their income on transport and accommodation, you may find that, with the fuel levy, even though it's not a vatable product per se, but there's going to be a fuel levy hike, they definitely will feel the pinch. And also an interesting study was done to say, government always says brown bread, for instance, is not vatable, and so we're shielding the poor. Studies found that the poor South Africans are actually eating white bread, not necessarily brown bread. So do we need to revise the basket of goods that is actually VAT exempt to reflect the spending pattern and consumption pattern of the typical South African?
And just before we await that announcement, what are you expecting to come out of it? What are the main highlights that we should be looking forward around the increase or decrease? It could go either way.
On interest rates, you mean?
Yes.
Personally, I think rates will remain the same, because even though we're having all these good news coming through from, politically, economically, we still do need to have the policies that were announced in, our budget speech in the State of the Nation address actually implemented. So although it was a good news story, I know a lot of ratings agencies and a lot of international investors will be looking to see if we're actually going to implement, for example, our fiscal consolidation policy.
Yeah, just before we wrap it up again, these VAT comparisons that you've compiled, and this is with regard specifically to the grocery list.
Correct.
And yeah, you mentioned that, poorer South Africans, according to some studies, show that they eat or prefer white bread. Let's have a look at some of the other household items.
So, for instance, sugar, you'll see that with the VAT increase, if it's $16.99 for a kilogram of brown sugar, you'll be spending at least 15 cents more per month. And what's interesting, if you look at, the middle column, which shows effective 1 April, what you can expect to spend, you're seeing numbers that are around 17.14. You're seeing numbers for maize meal, for instance, that are around 14.34. And we know that retailers don't price that way.
Yeah.
They usually price rounded off to A9. So if they're not going to absorb that, you'll actually have price increases that are probably higher than the VAT increase, only because for maize meal, instead of pricing it to 40.34, they'd price it at 40.39.
I was then going to ask that, but I see eggs, there seems to be no increase, as well as milk. But maize meal, is that not a basic? And I see that that does have an increase.
My apologies, maize meal is definitely exempt. So you're absolutely right. Bread, this is white bread, which is not exempt. Milk is definitely exempt. Eggs are exempt. Fresh vegetables are exempt. And maize meal is definitely exempt.
Right.
So that is my area there. But everything else is definitely vatable. And just on that point, for washing powder, for instance, 40.34, you'll expect that maybe a retailer will then say it's 40.99, which then drives the price inflation up higher than just the VAT increase. That's why you've had many economists saying that the VAT increase, although 1%, may drive actually the cost of goods increasing by more than 1%.
All right. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. That was wealth coach Samke Mhlongo giving us what we can expect around that rates increase or decrease, or perhaps it would stay the same. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. And some news just coming in. We do know that convicted racist Vicki Malmberg down in Durban has been convicted 2 years. This would make her the first South African in history to actually be charged with crimen injuria. We do know that case a couple of years ago of her making racist slurs to police officers just after a smash and grab. So word just coming in that she has been sentenced to 2 years. We will be giving you more updates on that story. Let's have a look now at our question of the day. We're asking, what do you make of the HIV testing controversy in the Eastern Cape? You can send us your comments at SABC SABC Newsroom. Let's have a look at some of the tweets that have already come in. We do know that this was on the backdrop of 12-year-olds being tested without the consent of their parents. Well, that's clear indication that pupils' rights were violated. Something has to be done. That one coming in from Anna. Lakasa saying that's clear indication that once again that both the departments involved must be sued, period. Let's have a look at our poll. We're asking today, the National Assembly has passed the political party funding bill. Do you support the decision? Of course, no private funding going forward, and if so, it needs to be declared. 71% of you are supporting the decision. 29% of you are saying no, just over 215 votes coming in. Tabo says, but why today? Anyway, I support it. Owen says they need the support. Obviously, we can't fail to support them, while the ruling party would be using funds anyhow they like, full of support of the bill. Indeed, let's have a look at a bit of your sports. Your sports question, we're asking, what do you think of Cricket Australia's decision is going to be? Send us your comments on @SABC Newsroom. We'll have a look at those tweets throughout the course of the morning. We do know that the final word on that will be handed down as to will they be banned? Will they be banned for life? We'll just have to wait and see for that announcement. Well, staying online, let's move over to Newsroom's Facebook page this morning. Firstly, we start off. 4 people have been arrested after a tip-off during a community meeting led to the Joburg Metro Police's K9 unit raiding a brothel in Diepkloof in Soweto at the weekend. And then International Relations Minister Lindiwe Sisulu will travel to Lesotho after Easter to personally apologize to King Letsetsi III for the treatment he received at a border post between Lesotho and South Africa. And finally, the 2 warring taxi organizations in the Eastern Cape, Ntendo as well as Border Alliance, have expressed disappointment at the police department's decision to suspend their operations on 2 major routes. Simply search for SABC Newsroom on Facebook, follow us and interact with us. Let's have a look at what's making headlines from our continental newspaper pages this morning. We'll start off here at home, South Africa. The Business Day reports that ratings agencies S&P Global injected a note of reality into the ratings optimism on Tuesday, reminding South Africa that though February's budget was much better than October's media-term budget, the deficits and debt projections were still worse than in 2017. North in Nigeria, the Daily Trust says the ruling All Progressives Congress will in the coming days announce a date for its national convention to elect new leaders. And finally, in Swaziland, the Observer reports that the 4 accident victims who lost their lives in a nasty accident on Sunday at the Matlaba Batsini in Mapacha have been identified. Resolutions on the Land Summit concludes today. South Africa to apologize to Lesotho King for the treatment he received at the border between the 2 countries. African News, Ethiopia's governing coalition elects its new leader. Leading at the half hour, International Relations Minister Lindiwe Sisulu will travel to Lesotho after Easter to apologize personally to King Letsie for the treatment that he received at the border between Lesotho and South Africa. Lesotho Minister of Foreign Affairs, Lesego Makoti, said at the end of the SADC Council of Ministers meeting in Pretoria that the King was held up for an hour while his vehicles were being searched. The incident comes amid complaints on social media about slow service at the border post. Meanwhile, the DRC gave its undertaking to hold elections this year, and member countries agreed to collaborate on listeriosis. Those are just some of the other outcomes there coming from that briefing.
There would be a letter on my desk from the King of Lesotho, who feels extremely aggrieved by the way that he was treated at the border. I have extended through him my sincerest apologies for this and have indicated to him that I will personally go to Lesotho to apologize to the King for any mistreatment he might have encountered at our border.
A looming shutdown of borders between Lesotho and South Africa has prompted this swift action.
Former First Minister is on the way to Maseru and Maputo to see the situation firsthand. And the Minister has shown positivity regarding solving the problems that we are being faced with.
Although the border issue dominated, Lesotho says its reform program towards political normality is delayed, but the country is stable, and the continued role of facilitator, President Cyril Ramaphosa, will be decided on his next visit to the Mountain Kingdom. In the DRC, violence has marred protests for President Joseph Kabila to step down, but when will the DRC hold elections that have been postponed since 2016?
They are currently preparing for elections and they have a roadmap towards election. It's a very sensitive time for them, and therefore they needed to brief us so that when we do speak, we are speaking from an informed position. Otherwise, it might cause serious problems for them.
SADC will send observer and support missions for elections in the DRC and Zimbabwe in July, and member states will collaborate on listeriosis.
The ministers were concerned if the companies would take over the social responsibility should there be any cases of listeriosis in the region. I consulted Minister Motsoaledi, who assured me that he is meeting or has met with the Ministers of Health, and this matter is a matter that is very much on the agenda.
SADC continues to emphasize its strategy on industrialization and the need to develop value chains in agriculture, metals, ARVs, and malaria medicines. Ntakwana Ngatani, SABC News, Pretoria.
Well, SABC News has exclusively learned that the United Nations is reviewing the deployment of the South African National Defence Force troops to its peacekeeping missions over growing concerns of misconduct and discipline within the ranks. Well, this posture was formally communicated to the SA mission to the UN after new allegations of sexual exploitation and abuse against several SANDF members serving in the MONUSCO mission in the Democratic Republic of Congo were revealed earlier this year. Well, this brings to 9 the number of allegations made public against South African troops in 2018. Allegations that have seen the SANDF deploy military investigators to the DRC to conduct a thorough review of the claims.
The South Africans are clear. They are talking to the UN and addressing all their concerns.
So there's no talk about South Africa pulling out troops from the DRC?
Well, we are even now requested to make sure that we provide night vision helicopters by June, because they still need us. I mean, DRC, Eastern DRC, you still need South Africa there. So we'll discuss with both Under-Secretary General of Peacekeeping, Secretary of Support, to discuss and iron out these issues. Because as we speak now, we have investigators on the ground in the Eastern DRC dealing with these issues, all of them.
The SABC understands that the Department of Peacekeeping had communicated with the South African mission expressing a deep appreciation for the long-standing and important contribution Pretoria has made to its operations. It also told South Africa that their deployments are under review in line with Security Council Resolution 2272 that empowers the Secretary-General to replace all military and police units from any contributing country against whom there exists credible evidence of widespread or systematic sexual exploitation and abuse. The UN has communicated to South Africa that they're still awaiting a full reply to requests for information as to how the country is tackling the sexual exploitation and abuse allegations within its ranks, over and above the cases it is currently investigating.
In the course of this year, we have received 2 note verbal on the matters as discussed that seek to inform us that there are allegations against our troops. The normal process is within 5 days you need to inform United Nations if you will investigate. Secondly, when you do investigate, inform UN of the investigation and the investigation outcome. And through a note verbal, we have communicated with the United Nations, with the Office of the Conduct and Discipline, CTU. I've been having face-to-face meeting with them. We have also been communicating to the leadership of the Department of Field Support, Mr. Atul Kare, to inform him in all the note verbals which we've resolved or we've received, that we have dispatched National Investigation Officers team that comprise our legal officers and the military police to do a thorough investigation on all the allegations reported against the South African troops.
They maintain that their relationship with UN peacekeeping remains strong.
It's not much attention. I think it's miscommunication that we're dealing with. The whole of last night, this morning, we've been saying to them, South Africa has always responded immediately on any allegations. And the Chief of Defence Force, General Shoke, has issued stern warning and instruction to the commanders on the ground in the mission areas to act immediately on these issues.
South Africa also clarified that it is not against joint investigations with the UN's Office of Internal Oversight Services into SEA, but called for such requests to be standardized across all peacekeeping missions. Sherwin Brycebees, SABC News, New York.
Well, the vote of no confidence in Nelson Mandela Bay Mayor Athol Trollip, set for tomorrow, could backfire for the EFF as the Patriotic Alliance wants Trollip to stay in charge. In the latest statement released by the party, they'll support the DA in the motion during the council meeting scheduled for tomorrow. This will result in the votes being deadlocked at 60 between the DA and the ANC alliances. The DA speaker would then have the deciding vote. SABC reporter Jade Lee-Pulser is with a political analyst. A very good morning to you, Jade. Can you give us a build-up to tomorrow's much-awaited day?
Can I speak?
Yes, good morning, Shantae. I'm coming to you live from the City Hall here in Port Elizabeth, where the DA are actually setting up for that march for support for their Mayor Athol Trollip at 12 o'clock. But I'm also told a separate gathering will be happening at Nangoza Jebe Hall by the EFF leader Julius Malema. But as you said, it's been quite a very interesting couple of hours here in the metro, with that statement being released by Gayton McKenzie, citing that they have struck a deal with the DA, and this could possibly help Athol Trollip survive that motion of no confidence against him tomorrow that has been brought by the EFF. Now, we do know that the Patriotic Alliance has one seat, and that vote is very crucial in swinging the survival of Athol within council. But just to pull in my political analyst here, Ungama Mtimka, just to break down what exactly it means for the metro. Ungama, tell me. Obviously, it's been quite an interesting couple of hours. We've seen, Athol Trollip coming out last night, citing that, there are some talks behind the scenes and that there's a possibility that the PA could side with the DA tomorrow.
Well, that was also confirmed by Gayton McKenzie in a statement to the media yesterday. So it seems like there's been quite a successful, lobbying of at least one of the political parties that have got one seat in council, and that's all that the DA needs to at least survive. 61 seats is a comfortable majority, but what the situation will be now, assuming everybody else remains in the positions they have communicated, we will have a situation where there's a split right in the middle, and the Constitution does allow the Speaker to then have a casting vote, which then will tilt things favorably for Athol Trollip because the Speaker comes from his same party.
Now, there's no secret that the PA have been gunning that deputy mayoral position, and there has been talks, for several months now that the PA will swing whichever party to ensure that they get that seat. Now, do you think that the talks or the rumblings behind the scenes, it is possible that the Marlon Daniels, who holds the seat in council, could possibly secure that deputy mayoral position as well as MMC for roads and transport?
Well, either that or a deal too sweet to refuse was offered to them, because if we recall, it was Marlon Daniels who led the process of removing the former deputy mayor Mongameli Bobani, and he then got in to be in the mayoral committee. But in no time, the relationship kind of broke down because they had their eyes, or the Patriotic Alliance that is, on the deputy mayoral position. And when the DA failed to kind of live up to that expectation, the relationship broke down, and the parties then wanted to recall Ethel Trollip, and the EFF actually came to the party there and saved him. So this time, I think they have gotten what they wanted, the Patriotic Alliance. But I also think that the relationship between Gayton McKenzie and Julius Malema at a national level cannot be underestimated in terms of what role it is playing, because I saw, for example, in the messaging of Gayton McKenzie that they kept emphasizing that the EFF didn't engage them at a national level, and because of the recent sort of animosity that has been there, you would have expected that precisely because there's been throughout national and local coordination, and local guys have always voted according to the script. It was common sense, for the EFF to try and engage everybody else, but also thinks this also points to perhaps the lax attitude the ANC has had, and also its readiness to actually lead the process here. And for a stability point of view, it might actually be working better for the people of Nelson Mandela Bay, not because of the political party that is there, but because of possible stability in the future. Because the ANC locally is in tatters, and it was going to battle to actually retain a united force between City Hall and Florence Matomela House.
Just bringing back that lackadaisical attitude, reading through that statement of Gayton McKenzie, he also cited that, the EFF calling out the DA for not siding with the land expropriation, that he called them racists. So do you think that it's also a moral dilemma from the PA, where they're sitting with a situation where they feel the ANC has been numb about this situation, or do you think it's just a political arena and they're just backing any sweet deal they can get?
I think where the messaging of the EFF must be strongly rebuked in a democracy is when they said they want to target Ethel Trollip for being white. I don't think we should accommodate those kinds of racist rants in our political discourse. But on the issue of land expropriation, we have a lot to do in the country. The approach that we adopted in '94 that says, well, we've been in conflict, there's been history, let's forgive each other and forget, without committing to a land reform program and a land redress program that is thoroughgoing, both at a state perspective and as well as private sector. We cannot really blame when there's frustrations that are beginning to bubble out, because we have precisely thought that as a nation we could continue with a settlement where the majority of the people of the country were ripped off, sorry to use the word.
Okay, Nangama, in your view, looking at all of this that has transpired over the couple of hours now, do you think that Ethel could possibly survive that motion of no confidence tomorrow? Or do you think that, because he hasn't really come out saying that they have struck a deal with the PA, do you think that it could all turn tomorrow?
Well, given the messaging that came from the ANC, their hesitation to actually lead the coalition government, that's one. Secondly, the developments that as of now, as of last night actually, where the PA Patriotic Alliance, committed its vote to the DA, I think it's a foregone conclusion. Except that, you never know what happens within few hours in politics.
Thank you, Mgama. That was political analyst Mgama Mtimka, just breaking down the current, information that has come to fore with Gayton McKenzie issuing out that statement, citing that the PA will be backing the DA and as well as the mayor of Nelson Mandela Bay, Athol Trollip, at the vote of no confidence tomorrow. It's back to you in studio.
Thank you very much. SABC reporter Jade Lee Pulser taking us through the build-up to tomorrow's motion of no confidence that has been put forward by EFF, as well as the PA distancing itself from the EFF alliance. We will be giving you more details around that. Some African news now. Ethiopia's governing coalition has elected Abiy Ahmed as its new leader. He comes from the country's Oromo ethnic group, which has been at the center of 3 years of anti-government protests. Ahmed will automatically become prime minister following the resignation of Hailemariam Desalegn last month. Sports, following the ball tampering scandal that rocked the third test between South Africa and Australia, Steve Smith, David Warner and Cameron Bancroft have been sent home. The trio will await further sanctions when Cricket Australia conclude investigations into the matter.
Cricket Australia Chief Executive Officer James Sutherland flew halfway around the world to try and salvage what's left of the team's integrity following Saturday's confession by Smith. According to Sutherland, no other players besides the banished three knew of the plan to alter the state of the ball. As such, rumours of coach Darren Lehman resigning have been dismissed as false. Sutherland tiptoed around questions of whether the team cheated or not.
James, there's one word you haven't mentioned. Did they cheat in your eyes? Is this cheating?
This is not, in the laws of the game, it is not in the spirit of the game. And again, I am angry and disappointed.
Is it cheating?
It is not a good day for Australian cricket.
This blatant deflection did not go down well with the media.
Mentioned that it broke the rules of the game, mentioned that it broke the spirit of the game, but I asked him outright if it was cheating and he wouldn't answer it. I don't know why. I guess it's up to him to answer that why. I guess the implications of saying that 3 players in the side, including the 2 most senior players, cheated is an enormous thing, but he didn't say it.
Newly appointed captain Tim Payne has his work cut out ahead of the 4th test beginning at the Wanderers this coming Friday. Mnigelo Madala, SABC News, Johannesburg.
And of course, that's also our sporting question that we're asking you. What do you think Cricket Australia's decision will be? We've asked you to send us your comments on @SABC Newsroom. Let's have a look at some of your tweets coming through as to what we think could possibly happen. Well, Matt says maybe a 3-month ban. Punishment should hurt but not destroy someone forever. Olani says, I think Australia is going to make an example and ban those players for life. And this one coming in, it is a disgrace to the Australian citizens. I think the alleged players will be banned for good. A very harsh punishments coming in from people commenting on Twitter. Well, we're just going to have to wait and see throughout the course of the day. We are waiting in anticipation to hear what the hearing will be. Let's have a look now at football now. Liverpool, a goal machine and reigning African Player of the Year, Mohamed Salah, sat on the bench as Egypt lost 1-0 to Greece in one of the international friendlies played last night. Well, the Pharaohs, who are preparing for their first World Cup appearance in Russia after a 28-year absence, failed to create chances and allowed Greece to boss proceedings. The lone goal came after 29 minutes when Nikos Gariles headed in the winner. And in Berlin, Brazil restored some pride when they beat the world champions 1-0 in Germany. Gabriel Jesus' first half goal at a sold-out Olympic Stadium saw Brazil end the Germans' unbeaten run of 22 games dating back to their Euro 2016 semi-final defeat by hosts France. And Spain underlined their status as chief contenders at this year's World Cup in Russia as they scored a 6-1 win over Argentina. Diego Costa bravely forced home Spain's opening goal on 12 minutes, and Isco doubled the lead before Nicolas Otamendi halved the deficit prior to the halftime. The absence of Lionel Messi left out of the squad by coach Jorge Sampaoli was telling. Isco bagged his second on 52 minutes, and Thiago Alcantara swiftly added another for the hosts, which spelled the end for Argentina. Iago Aspas and Isco again scored before the demolition ended for Argentina. And Tunisia, returning to the global showpiece after missing the last two tournaments, edged fellow qualifiers Costa Rica 1-0 in the French city of Nice. Morocco also overcame Uzbekistan 2-0 in Casablanca, and after surprising Poland on Friday, Nigeria disappointed when falling 2-0 to Serbia. Senegal drawing their 0 with Bosnia and Herzegovina. Let's move on to some of your rugby highlights now. A Lions wing Aphiwe Yankee has been ruled out of the Lions Super Rugby clash against the Crusaders. Yankee, who is tied for top spots on the South African try scorers charts alongside teammate Malcolm Marx with 5 tries, will be sidelined for up to 6 weeks with a torn pectoral muscle. It's a crucial blow for the 23-year-old who has been a revelation for the Lions in his maiden Super Rugby season. The match is a repeat of last year's final, which was won by the Crusaders 25-17, giving the Star side from New Zealand their 8th Super Rugby title kickoff on Sunday, the 1st of April, and that match is expected to take place at 2:30. So boxing now, WBA and IBF World Heavyweight Champion Anthony Joshua said that he will knock Joseph Parker out when the pair meet in Cardiff on Saturday. Undefeated Britain, Joshua is overwhelming favourite and will have home advantage against the New Zealander in the Principality Stadium. Parker, who is unbeaten in his 24 fights and brings with him the WBO belt, said he will win against Joshua but has not decided how he wants to beat him yet. Well, Joshua said he expects a tough fight that will go 12 rounds. Whoever wins will become a 3-belt heavyweight champion. And of course, so that brings a close to your sports. Sal, thank you very much for joining us. We'll wrap it up there.
This is your midday report. Good afternoon.
I will be faithful.
I assume as President of the Republic of Kenya.
Let's take a look at how African markets and currencies are performing now.
The central bankers say the success of Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies is just a bubble.
Breaking stories, detailed economy and sport. Tune into Midday Report every Monday to Friday from 12 p.m.
Violence against women, it also talks to such behavior where teachers, instead of educating kids and give them dignity, they strip them of their dignity.
The First Lady.
The First Lady. Her action, it's just unacceptable. I must say that. It cannot be condoned. If I had it my way, I would say we had to act and make sure that he goes to jail.
This scourge is not ceasing.
The angry people, the intolerant, it's so huge. So then the scourge finds itself within that particular environment. You cannot say that it's a standalone. It's influenced by social ills, economic challenges.
Join me in Port Said live every Monday to Thursday at 17:30.
South Africa is in need of a frank dialogue. My name is Onkgopote JJ Tabani. Join me every Sunday at 8:30 on SABC News Channel 404 as we speak to leaders of society, business and government about the state of our nation. Come now, let's talk frankly.
Breaking news, convicted racist Vicki Malmberg gets 3 years behind bars with 1 year of her sentence being suspended. Patriotic Alliance questions the reason behind EFF's motion of no confidence in Nelson Mandela Bay Mayor Athol Trollip. Opposition parties outraged by the reported multi-million rand event to bid farewell to ANC Secretary General Ace Magashule. In your sports, Cricket Australia will announce today further sanctions against its trio found guilty of ball tampering, says the ball tampering scandal. Coming to you live from Johannesburg, this is Newsroom. Thank you very much for joining me. I'm Shante Yankees. What to expect coming up in this hour? Lots of reaction to the precedent-setting sentencing of a racist Vicki Malmberg. We'll also be speaking to our reporter on that, as well as the issue around the testing of HIV and AIDS of school children in the Eastern Cape, all 12 without the consent of their parents. First things first, we'll have a look at your top story. Your breaking news at the top of the hour. Former real estate agent Vicki Malmberg has been sentenced to 3 years in prison with 1 year suspended in the Randburg Magistrates Court in the north of Johannesburg. Well, Malmberg was found guilty of criminal injury in November last year. This after her racist rant towards police officers who were trying to assist her after a smash and grab incident. Mangoba Mqunu has the latest. A very good morning to you, Mangoba. What's the latest with regards to the case and, of course, the outcome?
Well, certainly, Shante, I can say that this is certainly a landmark ruling in this matter. As we know that before, we've only seen those people who have been convicted of criminal injury or hate speech being given a mere fine for committing those acts. If you will recall the case of former estate agent Pennis Burrows, who also referred to black people as monkeys in a tweet that she posted a few years ago. You recall that during that incident, she was also found guilty of criminal injury and slapped with 150,000 rand fine. But in this case, we've seen the law really taking its course and really giving out a harsh sentence to Vicki Malmberg for the same charge of of criminal injury, and effectively she's been sentenced to 3 years behind bars, one of them which is suspended. And this means that she'll basically spend 2 years behind bars. And that is really a harsh sentence and a first of its kind in the country in such a matter involving hate speech. And the magistrate going at lengths to say that really this is a serious crime, and therefore the sentence that should be given for this crime should be a harsh one. And she said that this really indeed was a sad day for her as well to be given such a sentence, but she feels that it's in the interest of society for justice to be seen to be served, and therefore she believes that Vicki Malmberg should do some time behind bars, and that effectively means that she'll spend 2 years in prison.
Now, from the side of Vicki Malmberg, is she going to be appealing the outcome?
Well, seemingly so, Shante. It seems as if she intends to appeal this ruling because just shortly after that verdict was given by the magistrate, her lawyers did indicate to the court that they want to apply for bail. You recall that obviously now that she's been sentenced to 2 years behind bars, this means that her bail lapses, and therefore she is now supposed to go behind bars. And that's what happened immediately after that sentence was given out. She had to go downstairs to the cell, to the holding cells where she currently is now. But her lawyers are saying that they intend to actually oppose this sentence as well as the conviction that was given to her, and they have asked to apply for bail so that she can be released on bail, and they're saying that they want this to happen because they want to consult with their clients. And so we're expecting them to bring an application for appeal on Wednesday, this coming Wednesday, the next Wednesday, sorry. But of course, what they are saying is that they believe that this sentence was unfair, and they want it to really be reviewed by another court. But you recall previously to this, Sanjay, that her lawyers had always argued that Vicki Malmberg should be given actually a psychiatric treatment, that she should be sentenced to psychiatric treatment, saying that she did not mean to hurl those racist insults. They were arguing that she was stressed at the time because of the smash and grab that had occurred, and that she was not in her right mind at the time when she did commit this offense. So effectively they're saying now that they want to appeal this matter because they think that it's harsh and it's really uncalled for.
Indeed, thank you very much for giving us the update there. Mangoba Mqulu giving us an update there on convicted racist Vicki Malmberg. Of course, she has been sentenced to 3 years in prison with 1 year being suspended. We do know that Malmberg is set to appeal the conviction. Moving on, the president of the Patriotic Alliance, Gayton McKenzie, says his party will not support a motion of no confidence in a man when the only apparent basis for it happens to be that he's white. McKenzie has announced that the PA will not support tomorrow's EFF motion of no confidence in the DA mayor in the Nelson Mandela Bay Metro, Athol Trollip. The EFF brought the motion following the DA's rejection of the recent bill for land expropriation without compensation, with EFF leader Julius Malema citing Trollip's race. Asanda Ntama had the details, and the Economic Freedom Fighters leader Julius Malema will address supporters in Port Elizabeth ahead of the party's vote of no confidence motion against the DA mayor Athol Trollip later today. Meanwhile, the Democratic Alliance supporters are expected to come out in full force at the rally in front of the City Hall to show support for Mayor Athol Trollip ahead of the vote of no confidence tomorrow. Do stay tuned for that, as we will be crossing live as and when it begins. Opposition parties are also planning to boycott a function to bid farewell to ANC Secretary General Ace Magashule and welcome newly elected Free State Premier Sisi Ntobela today. Well, the Free State government has instructed government workers in Bloemfontein to leave work by 9 a.m. to attend the inauguration. Opposition parties labelled the function, which is reported to be costing millions of rand, as a waste of money. The Free State Premier's spokesperson, Tisetso Makele, says no employee is forced to participate and no employee will be punished if they do not leave early. Well, SASSA will today give a progress report to Parliament's Social Development Committee on the Constitutional Court judgment. The Court gave SASSA an extension of 6 months to continue working with Cash Paymaster Services to ensure that grants are being paid to beneficiaries. Well, the contract was due to expire on the 31st of March. this year, and SASSA had brought an application saying it was part of its system to allow CPS to hand over the payment of grants to the South African Post Office. In 2014, the court invalidated the contract to pay social grants to 17 million beneficiaries entering back in 2012. When Justice Leona Theron delivered her judgment, she warned former Social Development Minister Batapile Dlamini and acting SASSA CEO Pearl Bengu that they were not off the hook. Well, continuing with our reactions to breaking news this hour on the conviction of Vicki Malmberg, we continue to give you reactions. We are now joined by Melissa Steyn. She's the National Research Chairperson of WIT's Centre for Diversity Studies. Very good morning to you, Melissa. Thank you very much for joining us here on SABC Newsroom. It has now been deemed a landmark sentencing. What is your initial reaction?
Well, similar. I also think that it's a very, very important landmark that we've achieved in South Africa, because I think we're indicating quite clearly that, egregious racism will be dealt with and that our country is not going to tolerate that. So I think it's really important. It's important for what it says to ordinary citizens about the dignity of other people, of the way we have to engage with each other. And I think it sends an important message to parents in the country around how we have to socialize our children.
We do know that, hearing word from Malmberg's lawyers, that she is set to appeal the conviction. Her lawyers citing that she was not necessarily in the state of mind, as it was just after a smash and grab that took place, and that she is set to appeal. What do you make of that, on the grounds that the conviction is too harsh coming from her camp?
Well, most of us at some point or another, if we live in our urban areas in South Africa, will experience some form of crime, and in some ways that is an acid test. Those are the kinds of moments at which things like deep-seated racism either emerge or don't, So, I find that completely, just an unacceptable sort of argument. Most of us, as I say, we've all had difficult experiences, but we're not going to behave in that way.
Definitely. Thank you very much for giving us your reaction there. Melissa Steyn, National Research Chairperson of WIT's Centre for Diversity Studies. Just the reactions around the sentencing of Vicki Malmberg, 3 years prison sentence, one of which will be suspended. In some other news, the Minister of Home Affairs, Malusi Gigaba, will outline the state of readiness on the South African border environment for the 2018 Easter period. Well, the Easter period is one of the busiest times at South Africa's borders. The minister will reveal South Africa's state of readiness as an influx of Lesotho nationals, Zimbabweans and Mozambicans will be going home during Easter. The Bay Bridge border post was recently in the news when an immigration official was filmed using her cell phone while serving clients. Have a look at our question of the day. We're asking you, what do you make of the HIV testing controversy in the Eastern Cape? We've asked you to send us your comments on it at SABC Newsroom. We'll have a look at some of your tweets and more after the break.
No. Yes. Yes.
Sports Live every Saturday and Sunday at 7:30 p.m.
Well, what do you make of the HIV testing controversy in the Eastern Cape? You can send us your comments and we'll have a look at some of those tweets that have already come through. This is with regards to the testing being done allegedly in the Eastern Cape at a school without the consent of parents to children as young as 12. Let's have a look at your comments. SASSA says that's clear indication that pupils' rights were violated. Something has to be done. Sawa says both the departments involved must be sued, period. Let's have a look at our poll question today. We're asking, the National Assembly has passed the political party funding bill. Do you support the decision on not having private funding or having to disclose where exactly you are getting your funding from? Just over 250 votes coming in. 72% of you are agreeing and saying yes. 28% of you are saying no. Let's have a look at your views and your comments behind those numbers on our poll question and the party funding going forward. Let's have a look at some of the tweets. Well, Owen says they need the support. Obviously, we can't fail to support them. The ruling party would be using funds any way they like. Full support of the bill. Tebe says 100% supported. We want to see the captured parties. Oh, well, we're just going to have to wait and see. Thank you very much for sending in your comments. And with regards to our question of the day around that HIV testing down there in the Eastern Cape, we'll also be having a studio guest to discuss that. Exactly what are the rights, were there violations, and what are the parameters in testing kids at school for HIV or something else. But now, though, staying online, let's have a look at our Facebook page, SABC Newsroom this morning. 4 people have been arrested after a tip-off during a community meeting led to the Joburg Metro Police's K9 unit raiding a brothel in Diepkloof in Soweto at the weekend. And then the International Relations Minister Lindiwe Sisulu will travel to Lesotho after Easter to personally apologize to King Letsie III for the treatment he received at a border post between Lesotho and South Africa. And finally, the 2 warring taxi organizations in Eastern Cape, Incendo as well as the Border Alliance, have expressed disappointment at the police department's decision to suspend their operations on the 2 major routes. You can simply search for SABC Newsroom on Facebook, follow us and interact with us. Let's have a look now at what's making headlines around the continent here at home. South Africa, the Business Day reporting that ratings agency S&P Global injected a note of reality into the ratings optimism on Tuesday, reminding South Africa that though February's budget was much better than October's medium-term budget, the deficit and the debt projections were still worse than in 2017. Well, moving to Nigeria, the Daily Trust says the ruling All Progressives Congress will in the coming days announce a date for its national convention to elect new leaders. And finally, in Swaziland, the Swaziland Observer reports that the 4 accident victims who lost their lives in a nasty accident on Sunday at the Matlaba Batsini in Mapacha have been identified. Well, the Eastern Cape AIDS Council and the NGO responsible for HIV screening in schools, Ketempilo, have refuted allegations that they breached HIV/AIDS testing guidelines or infringed on the rights of pupils during an HIV screening of pupils in Alfonso Ari's primary school in Port Elizabeth. Well, this emerged during a meeting attended by the council, Ketempilo, the Basic Department of Education and the parents at the school, neither following an outcry by parents claiming there was neither parental consent nor counselling during the HIV screening. For more on the story, we are now joined in studio by Troy Martins, the Department of Basic Education's spokesperson, and from our Sea Point studios, Ashraf Grimwood, the CEO of Ketempilo. Very good morning to you both. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. I'll start with you, Ashraf. We understand that the Ketempilo has been operating for 13 years, correct me if I'm wrong, in the Western Cape and for more than a year in Port Elizabeth. What was the main objective of going to primary schools?
Well, let me just correct you. We've been working in the Eastern Cape for close on a decade. The point of working in the schools in the Eastern Cape was part of a national campaign funded by Global Fund to support the Department of Basic Education in assisting them in reducing HIV by 50%. And part of the strategy is to get children into clubs, high school kids into clubs, especially focusing on young women and girls, so that we can help them, assist them, retain them in schools, and ensure that they achieve their objectives. And one of the elements of this program was to test. So testing children through their prepubescent and pubescent periods and right up to 24. And one of the areas obviously would then need to be primary schools where kids over 12 are then tested.
Now there are allegations...
Or whoever wants to be tested can be.
There are allegations surrounding the situation with regards to some of the students actually being tested without the consent of their parents, being as young as 12, and as well as then their results then being read out in the presence of other learners, and thirdly, them not being offered counselling before and after.
Sure. So on investigation, well, first of all, none of those processes and allegations are correct. We do follow procedures. We work within the policies. We follow government guidelines, and we certainly ensure that the children do provide consent. Now, you know that the Child Care Act states that a child over 12 can consent for themselves. One doesn't really need parental consent, but consent forms are sent out with the children to the parents. Sometimes the parents see them, sometimes we don't. We cannot control that process, but certainly within government policy, the children can then come in and then get tested. They are then pre-test counselled and then post-test counselled, and results are provided to that learner, in front of that learner, not with anybody else in that vicinity. We cannot control if a learner broadcasts their results to somebody else, but within that environment we do follow the testing guidelines to the T. Certainly we are having ongoing quality improvement and quality assurance that needs to happen with these large programs. We are working in over 100 schools in the Eastern Cape and over 30 schools in KZN, all supporting young learners to stay in school so that we can ensure that this generation continues to be well and healthy for the future.
All right, Mr. Grimwood, I'm going to bring Troy Martins into the conversation here. Very good morning to you, Troy. Thank you very much for joining us. What do you make of the allegations surrounding this?
As the Department of Basic Education, we are obviously taking these allegations very seriously. We will be conducting our own investigation, which is already underway in the Eastern Cape ourselves, because obviously, you know, the parents are very upset. They've expressed their anger and their disappointment to yourselves in the media, and we're taking these allegations very, very seriously. We need to ensure that all the protocols have been followed to the letter, and we're dealing with young people and we're dealing with children, and this is a very sensitive topic, so we need to ensure that everything is done to the T. While we have received a report from the NGO stating their side of the story in essence, we need to ensure that we adequately investigate the allegations that have been made against them. We also need to remind the organisation that we have communicated with them to not test in primary schools. So this is something that we are also concerned about. While yes, the legal consenting age is 12 years old, we do still need to ensure that parents are adequately informed so that they can have these discussions with their children as well. We need those consent forms to go home to parents so that they are absolutely 100% informed about what's going on.
So coming from the side of the Basic Education Department, you're then saying that the testing of HIV and AIDS of school children at primary school should not take place, as in the case here with this NGO in the Eastern Cape.
That is what we're saying, yes.
All right, Mr. Grimwood, I'm going to bring you in a conversation here. Of course, we have a Basic Education Department spokesperson, Troy Martin, saying that from their side, they've encouraged that the testing of HIV and AIDS does not take place within a primary school context. What is your reaction to that?
Well, I mean, I think that this is a new development, and we totally would support the Department of Basic Education. We mustn't forget that we had meetings with the Department of Basic Education in February last year, 2017. These schools were offered offered to us to do our work. They understand the programs. We've discussed the various elements, the various clubs that we're doing within primary schools and within high schools. And and yes, the sensitivities of testing, especially 12 and up, especially that younger age group, is understood. And definitely we agree that parents need to be informed, they need to be involved. Going forward, I think we need to just be cognizant that these sensitivities do exist, and we need to then ensure that we do not do this going forward. But there needs to be ongoing dialogue. We are sitting with close on 40,000 children HIV positive in the province. 50% of them are on treatment. We need to make sure that we do pick up learners who are positive early so that they do not become ill. So there is the public health concern that we deal with HIV sensitively, but we must ensure that we get people onto treatment as soon as we can before they become ill.
Definitely. I think the issue here seems to be around the way in which it was conducted in the reports coming through from the parents' side. Many of them are saying that they had no idea that their children would be tested. And then, of course, those other reports there, and one of the reports that we actually had on air running yesterday, of a parent actually telling our reporter that, I don't know what to tell my child when my child comes home and says that I was told that I have HIV, and it was announced in front of other people's. From your side, from the NGO side, are you not then going to be reviewing your policies in a way that your testing as well as the counselling, which also seems to not have been done in this case, can be reviewed going forward?
Well, I mean, having worked in HIV for close on 30 years, and how people broadcast their results to each other, we've got no control over. But certainly we are appointing an independent or a consultant to look at all these steps, to look at where we can improve, to ensure that communication, especially once the individual gets their results, and how that person then broadcasts those results could be better managed, but we would not be able to have any control over that. Certainly it does mean that we need to do more education and more counselling for individuals. Going forward, I mean, especially for those who are also negative, because sometimes when people get a negative result, they also don't hear that there's a negative result. And they might then say that they, because of their concern and their anxiety, state an incorrect result or an incorrect interpretation of a negative result.
Right, let's just discuss the age, Troy. At 12, can a 12-year-old actually comprehend, to understand what consent is, to understand what HIV/AIDS is, and to actually give consent in signing and saying, I understand fully, I comprehend what is happening, and what the consequences of the result that I receive might be?
I think that's the key question, and I think we need to be sensitive when we're working with children and understand that children maybe will react to things differently than an adult would, and maybe they won't, like the gentleman indicated, that you know, they can't control if the child broadcasts their status, but perhaps that child doesn't understand the consequences of that status, whether it be negative or positive. So I think these are things that really need to be taken into consideration when the testing is done. And this is why it is so vitally important to bring parents on board and ensure that they are involved in this process. I mean, what we've seen happen and playing out in the Eastern Cape is that we've seen parents visibly and extremely angry at how the process was handled. And we need to be cognizant of that. And this is why it's so important in everything that we do in the Department of Basic Education. We ensure that we bring parents and parent organizations especially on board. We get community buy-in and community involvement. We're actually in the process of, on the 1st of April, I think it's April this year, we're going to be launching the implementation of our HIV TB prevention policy in schools. And this is also something that we've really gone out and we've workshopped across the whole country, because we know how important it is, from the teachers that are going to be implementing this policy to the parental organizations, the school governing body organizations that their children are going to be involved in this. It's so important that we bring all those stakeholders on board, and we've looked in the different provinces at how we're going to implement it in different contexts. So it's really important to go through these processes so that we don't have incidents like this playing out.
Definitely. And Mr. Grimwood, do you think that further then dialogue now needs to take place between NGOs such as yourself as well as the Basic Education Department to some way come to some sort of a medium and an understanding going forward in the conducting of tests, as well as, you know, other activities that the NGO does with regards to school children on a primary school premises?
Absolutely. I mean, I think there's always room for ongoing dialogue. I think we're not in a place to question policies and guidelines and regulations. We are there just to implement and make sure that we do it according to the regulations and the requirements. Where there are these sensitivities that come up, certainly that require, it means that there's the extra dialogue, and the question raised about 12-year-olds, can they make decisions? Well, that's within the guidelines and that's in the Child Care Act. So besides that, we are just the implementers, but we obviously need to make sure that we implement it sensitively in partnership, as we are with the National DBE, in making sure that we meet their criteria. I mean, our mission as Ketempilo is to support government departments in reaching their goals and directives and their targets when it comes to achieving what they've set out. And we would certainly want to do that. And our vision as an NGO is an AIDS-free generation in our time. So we are working towards that as workers in the field, as community workers, as primary healthcare activists in a way. That is what we're wanting to achieve. And certainly we are very sensitive to how communities respond. Our focus as an NGO has always been working with communities, and it is disappointing and it is sad and upsetting for us to see how people have reacted. And certainly we need to ensure that communication is there, that there's dialogue, that parents are involved, if not the parents, if they're caregivers, the primary caregivers involved, because we all want the same thing for our children. We want our children well, healthy, and completing school. So I think we're all on the same page. We just need to make sure that we do it better and that there's ongoing review so that we improve our processes.
Let's wrap it up there. That was Troy Martin's Department of Basic Education spokesperson. And from our Sea Point studios, Ashraf Grimwood, the CEO of Ketempilo, the organisation in which the HIV testing was actually done by in the Eastern Cape. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. Well, let's go to our breaking news this morning, and on the backdrop of that, we're asking you, do you think that the 2-year jail sentence handed to Vicki Malmberg is fair? Let's have a look at some of your tweets now that have been coming through. Khosi says it's fair, I'm happy with it, it's not like she killed someone. Kagiso says it's not fair, she should have been slapped with 15 years. Parliament of South Africa must process a proper legislation as soon as possible so that we can finish off racists. Eugene says this is nothing. She was supposed to get at least 5 years. And Manza says, I feel that the 2 year is not enough. racism is a problem in this country and it must be banned like the Nazi slogans and the symbols are in Germany. The last one coming in here from Bakoyame. It's not even a pain to the person who's done the word. It brings a nightmare of the past. Resolutions on the land summit as it concludes today. South Africa to apologize to Lesotho King for the treatment he received at the border between the two countries. Ethiopia's governing coalition elects its new leader. Welcome back. Well, of course, introductions to the drunk driving happens every single year, especially around the holidays, and it seems to be steadily getting worse. Despite ramped up awareness campaigns, highly publicized death toll statistics, and imminent threats of a demerit system, drivers continue to get behind the wheel after having too much to drink. Well, drunk driving is an ongoing problem in South Africa that no amount of media coverage seems to be curbing. Rates Evans, the director at AlcoSafe, says that South African drivers are notoriously irresponsible when it comes to driving and drinking, and they don't generally consider the possibility of causing or being involved in an accident, and the thought of being pulled over isn't terrifying enough in the face of prevalence of corruption and bribery. Well, Race Evans is in studio and joins us. A very good morning to you. Thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Very good morning. Thanks for having me.
Senator, why do you think that road campaigns seemingly not to be effective?
Well, it's because of multiple causes, really. So one of the big problems is that we're not starting to educate people from a young enough age. So once people have got a mindset, it's very difficult to change that mindset. If we start doing education around driving in schools from a very young age, then you're going to instill that, that correct mindset from a young age. So you're not trying to change a mindset, you're creating the correct mindset from the onset. So yeah, that's one of the major problems. A number of other problems, not effective enforcing, not consistent enforcing, and in many cases not strict enough penalties.
Now, why do you say that South African drivers are notoriously known for not necessarily understanding or comprehending what they're actually doing when they drink and drive?
Well, I think, again, it's a lack of education around the topic. So a lot of people don't really realize how much they can have to drink and still legally drive on the roads. So that's one of the major problems. People are arrogant and they don't believe that it will happen to them. So there's this notion that it's not going to happen to me. I'm a better driver when I'm drunk. And a lot of people generally go out with the intention not to drink and drive. They have a few drinks and then their mindset changes and they make bad decisions.
Yeah, and do you think more can be done in enforcing not drinking and driving? Let's leave the police aside. If you work at a restaurant or you work at a bar or a club, is it not also the responsibility of the owner or the bartender or a service patron helping you to, not let you leave and get into a car drunk, or possibly then call law enforcement officials saying, this person is intoxicated, this person is getting in a car? Are that also not some of the areas that we could look at in trying to curb this?
Yeah, it's definitely something we need to start doing. So I've spent some time in Australia and they have exactly that. So if you have had too much to drink, the bar can be fined, the owners of the bar can be fined.
Yeah.
So if the police stop you, they'll ask you where you've come from. The owners of that bar will be fined for allowing you to have too much to drink. So if you're sitting in a club or you're sitting in a bar and you've had too much, they'll stop serving you. They'll insist that you drink water. They'll ask you to sit outside and leave. So it's the responsibility of the institution where you are to make sure that you don't have too much to drink. So you can't just sit there and order as much as possible. In South Africa, we generally have this idea that we should make as much money as possible, and as long as you can pay, you're still good to be served. And that's something which really has to change. So yes, institutions have to start taking responsibility, and fines have to be imposed on places that are serving people that are over intoxicated.
Yeah. Do you think more than can be done from law enforcement side? I mean, we see in the States that having a DUI is a very serious offence, and in South Africa it still seemingly seems to be not taken quite seriously. I was caught drunk and driving. I was put in jail for the past couple of days. I spent the weekend there, and now I'm out.
Yeah, and even if it gets to that, so a lot of the time people aren't spending any time in jail. So what we're seeing in the States and in the UK as well is that a lot of the police are being asked to wear body cameras. The body cameras stop bribery, which is a very big problem, we know it here. And also what they do is they protect the police officer from abuse from drunk drivers, because they can then come forward and say, but you know, I was abused by this drunk driver, and this is why I had to take this type of action against them. So it protects the police officer, and it also makes sure that drivers who are transgressing the law are actually prosecuted. So yeah, we can learn from other countries. DUI in the States, if you're caught with DUI, they'll put a device called an interlock into your vehicle. So if it's your first offense, for instance, they'll say that we're going to put this device into your car. Whenever you try to start your vehicle, you'll have to blow into it, and you'll blow below the below the drink driving limit, and then they'll allow you to drive. Okay. If you fail the test, it will be recorded into that device memory. You won't be allowed to drive, and then you'll have to appear, because you would basically be out on probation, then your sentence would kick in. So there's really a constant monitoring of previous offenders, and that's something we can enforce here.
Let's also have a look at you know, the other factors that people seem to forget, that one can actually fall asleep while driving on the road, specifically long distances. Are drivers still not adhering to the repeated calls, stop every you know, 2 or 3 hours, relax, you know, stretch if you need to? Are we still seeing that as a common occurrence? It
is a very common occurrence, and again for a number of reasons. Unfortunately, people are impatient. They want to get to their destination as quickly as possible, rather than, you know, taking their time and make sure they get there safe. You know, there's this saying that says, rather get there late and alive than dead on time. So people need to listen to that. The other problem, unfortunately, is pressure from employers. You know, employers will say that we need to make this delivery, you need to get the stock there on time, and so on. So they're forcing drivers to drive longer hours than they should be, forcing them to rush, rather than saying, let's get the stock there safely and our driver there safely. They try to push the time element. So drink driving and driving with fatigue are very comparative to each other. Concentration goes down, your decision making is heavily impaired. So driving with fatigue is extremely dangerous, and people don't realize that.
And then in terms of motorists actually checking that their cars are roadworthy when they, you know, go on long distance, especially now during the Easter weekend. You know, some citing that, you know, you failed the roadworthy test, but I have to go back home, I have responsibilities. You know, what are some of the issues that we're seeing around the actual vehicle maintenance and maybe the expenses thereof?
Yeah, so the expenses is the problem, but you know, it's a lot cheaper to stay at home than drive and have an accident and your car's written off. A lot of the people that say they can't afford the expenses are also not paying for insurance. So if then they then have an accident, that car's completely written off, and then they're even in a worse position than they were beforehand. So I don't think it's a good enough excuse to say that maintenance is too expensive. Basic maintenance, you know, is priceless. So you have to do that. I saw a very interesting survey recently where people are doing something like only 50% of people are regularly servicing their cars when they should be. Yeah. And that's something that you just have to do. You know, otherwise, you're taking your life in your hands.
Indeed. Thank you very much for joining us, talking about road safety during the Easter weekend. Of course, Race Evans, director at ALCO, talking to us about road safety around Easter weekend, drunk drivers, as well as failure to maintain and not passing, of course, roadworthy tests with regards to vehicles. Let's have a look now at some other news. International Relations Minister Lindiwe Sisulu will travel to Lesotho after Easter to apologize personally to King Letsie for the treatment he received at the border between Lesotho and South Africa. Lesotho Minister of Foreign Affairs Lesego Makoti said at the end of the SADC Council of Ministers meeting in Pretoria that the King was held up for an hour while his vehicles were being searched. The incident comes amid complaints on social media about slow service at the border post. Meanwhile, the DRC also gave its undertaking to hold elections this year, and member countries agreed to collaborate on listeriosis, among other things.
There would be a letter on my desk from the King of Lesotho, who feels extremely aggrieved by the way that he was treated at the border. I have extended through him my sincerest apologies for this, and have indicated to him that I will personally go to Lesotho to apologize to the King for any mistreatment he might have encountered at our border.
A looming shutdown of borders between Lesotho and South Africa has prompted this swift action.
Former First Minister is on the way to Maseru and Maputo to see the situation firsthand. And the Minister has shown positivity regarding solving the problems that we are being faced with.
Although the border issue dominated, Lesotho says its reform program towards political normality is delayed, but the country is stable, and the continued role of facilitator President Cyril Ramaphosa will be decided on his next visit to the Mountain Kingdom. In the DRC, violence has marred protests for President Joseph Kabila to step down, but when will the DRC hold elections that have been postponed since 2016?
They are currently preparing for elections and they have a roadmap towards election. It's a very sensitive time for them and therefore they needed to brief us so that when we do speak, we are speaking from an informed position. Otherwise, it might cause serious problems for them.
SADC will send observer and support missions for elections in the DRC and Zimbabwe in July, and member states will collaborate on listeriosis.
The ministers were concerned if the companies would take over the social responsibility should there be any cases of listeriosis in the region. I consulted Minister Motsoaledi, who assured me that he is meeting or has met with the Ministers of Health, and this matter is a matter that is very much on the agenda.
SADC continues to emphasize its strategy on industrialization and the need to develop value chains in agriculture, metals, ARVs, and malaria medicines. Ntakwana Ngatani, SABC News, Pretoria.
African News, Ethiopia's governing coalition has elected Abiy Ahmed as its new leader. He comes from the country's Oromo ethnic group, which has been at the center of 3 years of anti-government protests. Ahmed will automatically become Prime Minister following the resignation of Hailemariam Desalegn last month. Take a short break here. When we come back, we'll have a look at some of your sporting highlights.
Special assignment. Crime keeps the society in terror and pain. Why so?
If someone phones me, tells me, okay, look, you need a solver, and I get you all driving, I'll take it.
What pushes normal people to be so hard, heartless, and brutally kill one another?
The other side of it could be more for their own psychological need. It might be part of a sexual fantasy that they have. It could be about power and control.
After proper investigation is followed, the perpetrator gets arrested.
It's quite a massive process. And ultimately, we have payments, so I think justice is served.
Emotional scars remain.
We would pay any price to get him back, and the sad reality is that it's gone.
Special assignment. We unravel the truth every Sunday at 21:30.
For your weekly dose of art and entertainment news, tune into Trends every Saturday from 12 to 1.
Have a look at some of your sporting highlights. Well, following the ball tampering scandal that rocked the third test between South Africa and Australia, Steve Smith, David Warner and Cameron Bancroft have been sent home. The trio will await further sanctions when Cricket Australia conclude investigations into the matter.
Cricket Australia Chief Executive Officer James Sutherland flew halfway around the world to try and salvage what's left of the team's integrity following Saturday's confession by Smith. According to Sutherland, no other players besides the banished three knew of the plan to alter the state of the ball. As such, rumours of coach Darren Lehman resigning have been dismissed as false. Sutherland tiptoed around questions of whether the team cheated or not.
James, there's one word you haven't mentioned. Did they cheat, in your eyes? Is this cheating?
This is not, in the laws of the game, it is not in the spirit of the game. And again, I am angry and disappointed.
Is it cheating?
It is not a good day for Australian cricket.
This blatant deflection did not go down well with the media.
Mentioned that broke the rules of the game, mentioned that broke the spirit of the game, but I asked him outright if it was cheating and he wouldn't answer it. I don't know why. I guess it's up to him to answer that why. I guess the implications of saying that three players in the side, including the two most senior players, cheated is an enormous thing, but he didn't say it.
Newly appointed captain Tim Payne has his work cut out ahead of the fourth test beginning at the Wanderers this coming Friday. Mnigelo Mandela, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Well, sports question, we're asking, what do you think Cricket Australia's decision will be? Send us your comments on @SABC Newsroom. Let's have a look at some of the tweets that have already coming through, quite harsh ones this morning. But Stefana says, I think those players who are involved in that incident, they deserve to be banned for life. Those players must be banned for life again, Eugene's coming in. And Anna says, obviously just a suspension. Well, with that news just coming in and an update, Steve Smith and David Warner, the former captain and vice-captain of the Australian cricket team, have been banned for 1 year. Cricket Australia has also banned Cameron Bancroft, who actually did the ball tampering that has rocked the team in recent days, for only 9 months. ESPN Chris Info says that all three have the right to appeal these sanctions. They are all scheduled to leave South Africa today and have been replaced ahead of the fourth and final test in Johannesburg. Well, Tim Payne has been handed the captaincy. Smith is expected to speak publicly for the very first time since admitting the plan to tamper with the ball during the third test when he arrives home in Sydney. Well, we will be giving you more reactions and details around that. Let's have a look now at some football. Well, Liverpool goal machine and reigning African Player of the Year, Mohamed Salah, sat on the bench as Egypt lost 1-0 to Greece in one of the international friendlies played last night. Well, the Pharaohs, who are prepping for their first World Cup appearance in Russia after a 28-year absence, failed to create chances and allowed Greece to boss proceedings.
And headed into the back of the net.
The lone goal came after 29 minutes when Nikos Karelis headed in the winner. And in Berlin, Brazil restored some pride when they beat the world champions 1-0 in Germany. Gabriel Jesus' first half goal at a sold-out Olympic stadium saw Brazil end the Germans' unbeaten run of 22 games dating back to their Euro 2016 semi-final defeat by hosts of France. Well, Spain underlined their status as chief contenders at this year's World Cup in Russia as they scored a 6-1 win over Argentina. Diego Costa bravely forced home Spain's opening goal on the 12 minutes, and Isco doubled the lead before Nicolas Otamendi halved the deficit prior to the halftime. The absence of Lionel Messi, left out of the squad by coach George Sampaoli, was telling. Isco bagged his second on 52 minutes, and Thiago Alcantara swiftly added another for the hosts, which spelled the end for Argentina. Olagaspas and Isco again scored before the demolition ended for Argentina. And Tunisia, returning to the global showpiece after missing the last two tournaments, edged fellow qualifiers Costa Rica 1-0 in the French city of Nice. Morocco overcame Uzbekistan 2-0 in Casablanca, And after surprising Poland on Friday, Nigeria disappointed when falling 2-0 to Serbia. Senegal drew 0-0 with Bosnia and Herzegovina. Some rugby now. Lions wing Apiwe Yankee has been ruled out of the Lions Super Rugby clash against the Crusaders. Yankee, who is tied for the top spot on the South African try scorer charts, alongside teammate Malcolm Marks, with 5 tries, will be sidelined for up to 6 weeks with a torn pectoral muscle. It's a cruel blow for the 23-year-old, who has been a revelation for the Lions in the maiden Super Rugby season. The match is a repeat of last year's final, which was won by the Crusaders 25-17, giving the Star side from New Zealand their 8th Super Rugby title. The kickoff is on Sunday, the 1st of April, set to start around 2:30. And some boxing. WBA and IBF World Heavyweight Champion Anthony Joshua said that he will knock Joseph Parker out when the pair meet in Cardiff on Saturday. Undefeated Britain Joshua is the overwhelming favourite and will have home advantage against the New Zealander in the Principality Stadium. Parker, who is unbeaten in his 24 fights and brings with him the WBO belt, said he will win against Joshua, but has not decided how he wants to beat him just yet. Joshua said he expects a tough fight that will go up to 12 rounds. Whoever wins will become a 3-belt heavyweight champion. Back to our breaking story. Steve Smith and David Warner, the former captain and vice-captain of the Australian cricket team, have been banned for 1 year. Cricket Australia has also banned Cameron Bancroft, who actually did the ball tampering that rocked the team in the recent days. He's been banned for 9 months. ESPN Crick Info says that all 3 have the right to appeal the sanctions. They are all scheduled to leave South Africa today and have been replaced ahead of the 4th and final test in Johannesburg. Well, Tim Payne has been handed the captaincy. Smith is expected to speak publicly for the very first time since admitting the plan to actually tamper with the ball during the 3rd test when he arrives home in Sydney. Well, that's a wrap up of your sport. Phil Hawkins is standing by with all your weather highlights.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, let's take a look at that weather for today, and we're going to start off by taking a look at our rainfall. Now, at the moment, we're seeing some cloud cover starting to develop into wet weather through that far northern region of southern Africa here and then into Central Africa as well. The southern parts of southern Africa expect rainfall to start to develop through the western interior as we move through into the evening. As you can see there, it's primarily concentrated on that western interior for both today and tomorrow. Tomorrow afternoon, though, we're going to start to see that spreading a little bit further west. Now, today, Cape Town's not expecting much rainfall, if any at all. Tomorrow and through the course of the evening, we will start to see rainfall in Cape Town, which is fantastic news. Now, we do have a weather warning for you for today, and it's going to be for a high veld fire danger forecast over most of the western interior of South Africa. So definitely something you're going to want to watch out for if you're in the affected area. As I said, isolated showers forecast towards the west, so isolated to scattered showers, in fact, Springbok, Sutherland, Port Elizabeth, but Cape Town missing out on it for today. Cloud cover, rainfall only developing later into the evening and into tomorrow. Temperatures in general in South Africa remain fairly warm. We'll see temperatures generally rising through the mid to high 20s and into the lower to mid 30s. Our neighbouring states seeing similar conditions here, 32 degrees in Beitbridge, 28 in Windhoek with a bit of wet weather coming in there. A little bit of showers forecast for Bulawayo and Harare as well. Maputo, 29 degrees, partly cloudy skies and dry conditions. What a beautiful day it will be there in Maputo. Now, Fianarantsoa and Tananarivo and Mahajanga all expecting isolated to scattered showers. We are seeing low pressure systems affecting the area. A lot of cloud cover forecast, but nevertheless warm conditions. And that means that we're going to see high humidity. 32 degrees forecast for Dar es Salaam for today, a maximum of 25 in Kigali and Nairobi. And all 3 of these areas do expect rainfall. Mombasa and Kilimanjaro just missing out on that rain for today. A lot of rainfall is forecast for the western parts of Central Africa as we see showers extending through most areas there. Luanda missing out, but a 29-degree high means it's going to be a warm and cloudy day. Fairly high humidity through most of this region, even compared to normal conditions. Now, the low pressure systems we've been seeing affecting those northern coastlines of Africa and rather devastatingly affecting parts of Europe Those are still acting on the far eastern areas of Africa on those coastlines both today and tomorrow. You can see that strong low pressure system starting to move into the Middle East. That's bringing in cool conditions, and that's bringing in wet conditions, not only today but tomorrow for Africa's northeast. That's where we're going to leave your weather for now. Stay with us here on the SABC.
Breaking news, convicted racist Vicki Malmberg gets 3 years behind bars with 1 year of her sentence suspended. Patriotic Alliance questions the reason behind EFF's motion of no confidence in the Nelson Mandela Bay Mayor Athol Trollip. Opposition parties outraged by the reported multi-million rand event to bid farewell to ANC Secretary General Ace Magashule. Well, cricket captain Steve Smith and vice captain David Warner have been banned for 1 year. Coming to you live from Johannesburg, this is Newsroom. Thank you very much for tuning in. I'm Shante Yankees. A lot to expect this hour, including the reactions there from Cricket Australia with regards to the banning of their captain and vice captain, as well as reactions from the sentencing of racist Vicki Malmberg. First things first, let's have a look at your top story. Well, leading at the hour, a former real estate agent, Vicki Malmberg, has been sentenced to 3 years in prison with 1 year suspended in the Randburg Magistrates Court in the north of Johannesburg. Malmberg was found guilty of criminal injury in November last year. This after her racist rant towards police officers who were trying to assist her after a smash and grab incident. Earlier, I spoke to reporter Mangoba Mcunu on the sentencing.
This is certainly a landmark ruling in this matter, as you know that before we've only seen those people who have been convicted of criminal injury or hate speech being given a mere fine for committing those acts. If you will recall the case of former estate agent Penny Sparrows, who also referred to black people as monkeys in a tweet that she posted a few years ago. You recall that during that incident, she was also found guilty of criminal injury and slapped with 150,000 rand fine. But in this case, we've seen the law really taking its course and really giving out a harsh sentence to Vicki Malmberg for the same charge of a criminal injury, and effectively she's been sentenced to 3 years behind bars, one of them which is suspended, and this means that she'll basically spend 2 years behind bars, and that is really a harsh sentence and a first of its kind in the country in such a matter involving hate speech. And the magistrate going at lengths to say that really this is a serious crime, and therefore the sentence that should be given for this crime should be a harsh one. And she said that this really indeed was a sad day for her as well to be given such a sentence, but she feels that it's in the interest of society for justice to be seen to be served, and therefore she believes that Vicki Malmberg should do some time behind bars, and that effectively means that she'll spend 2 years in prison.
Now, from the side of Vicki Malmberg, is she going to be appealing the outcome?
Well, seemingly so, Shantae, it seems as if she intends to appeal this ruling because just shortly after that verdict was given by the magistrate, her lawyers did indicate to the court that they want to apply for bail. You recall that obviously now that she's been sentenced to 2 years behind bars, this means that her bail lapses, and therefore she is now supposed to go behind bars. And that's what happened immediately after that sentence was given out. She had to go downstairs to the cell, to the holding cells where she currently is now. But her lawyers are saying that they intend to actually oppose this sentence as well as the conviction that was given to her, and they have asked to apply for bail so that she can be released on bail, and they're saying that they want this to happen because they want to consult with their clients. And so we're expecting them to bring an application for appeal on Wednesday, this coming Wednesday, the next Wednesday, sorry. But of course what they are saying is that they believe that this sentence was unfair, and they want it to really be reviewed by another court. But you recall previously to this, Sanjay, that her lawyers had always argued that Vicki Malmberg should be given actually a psychiatric treatment, that she should be sentenced to psychiatric treatment, saying that she did not mean to hurl those racist insults. They were arguing that she was stressed at the time because of the smash and grab that had occurred, and that she was not in her right mind at the time when she did commit this offense. So effectively they're saying now that they want to appeal this matter because they think that it's harsh and it's really uncalled for.
I also think that it's a very, very important landmark that we've achieved in South Africa, because I think we're indicating quite clearly that, egregious racism will be dealt with and that our country is not going to tolerate that. So I think it's really important. It's important for what it says to ordinary citizens about the dignity of other people, of the way we have to engage with each other. And I think it sends an important message to parents in the country around how we have to socialize our children.
Mm. We do know that, hearing word from Malmberg's lawyers, that she is set to appeal the conviction, her lawyers citing that she was not necessarily in the state of mind, as it was just after a smash and grab that took place, and that she is set to appeal. What do you make of that, on the grounds that the conviction is too harsh coming from her camp?
Well, most of us at some point or another, if we live in our urban areas in South Africa, will experience some form of crime, and in some ways that is an acid test. Those are the kinds of moments at which things like deep-seated racism either emerge or don't, So, I find that completely, just an unacceptable sort of argument. Most of us, as I say, we've all had difficult experiences, but we're not going to behave in that way.
Indeed, continuing with those reactions about the Vicki Malmberg story, we're now joined by Sarah Gum from the South Africa Institute of Race Relations. A very good morning to you, Sarah. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
First things first, your initial reaction.
My initial reaction is it's probably largely expected. It was a horrific incident. It was racist. It was demeaning, and unlike if you compare it to Penny Sparrow, she pleaded not guilty. In other words, the court had to go through the entire process and determine the matter. Her defence, as we heard, was that she'd been the victim of a crime and she was not in a good state of mind. But the nature of the event, and I think most of us at some point have heard the video on it, was really extraordinary. So I'm not surprised that there's been a jail sentence imposed.
Mm-hmm. With regards to it being appropriate, of course, it has been described as a landmark ruling or sentence that's been handed down, setting some sort of a precedent going forward. And without there being something like this have happened before, there is no necessarily a benchmark that has been placed around, you know, a ruling such as this. With that being said, is it appropriate?
It's very difficult to tell, to be quite honest, having not sat in the court. But again, if you, some people will say that imprisonment of that length is harsh. Some not. I think the question of whether it was too harsh or not too harsh would ultimately be defined by the appeal court.
Let's discuss generally race relations in South Africa.
Race relations it's in a strange position at the moment, because on the one hand, very few people, according to our research, are affected by race. Race does not impinge on their daily lives at all. But there's no doubt that in the last 2 or 3 years, since the issue of race has become very public and debated and very strong opinions have been formed, you are hearing more and more comments about the extent of racism. Is there racism? What is the racism? Is it untenable? Is it only black? Is it only white? Or is it both? Those conversations are being held much more. So people are very much conscious about the subject of race and speaking on it.
And, you know, going forward, you know, many would say that this, in some instances, is a reflection of minority and how the minority continue to see, you know, South Africa. Is this the case?
I certainly hope not, and I certainly don't think so. I think it has to be seen as the opinion of a single person, because I don't know many white people who would want to be associated in any way with what she said or did. What I do think it does open up, though, is it does open up the possibility of crimen injuria, which is criminal defamation. That's why it goes to a criminal court, of criminal injuria being used against people who say things that are racist or perceived to be racist, and that will be both black and white. And it does certainly, it's very public, so it's certainly going to come to the fore.
We're definitely going to be seeing a change now in people expressing their views as per se with regards to race going forward. Do you think that this judgment was good in the presence of society and moving forward and going forward?
I think it was an unsurprising judgment, and it was good in the sense that it seemed to find what the evidence presented. How it's going to play out in future is very difficult to tell. Whether it will stop or limit that sort of behaviour in public, which is really what you're aiming for. You can't dictate what people do in private. Or whether it will cause people to be more aggressive and to test the system, it's very difficult to tell.
But hopefully just to, you know, let people know that it is wrong.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
you can be brought to law because it's wrong.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for joining us.
My
This
pleasure.
morning, that was Sarah Gom from the South African Institute of Race Relations, just unpacking some of the reactions there of the judgment handed down on convicted racist Vicki Malmberg, sentenced to 3 years in prison, one of which will be suspended. Well, remaining with that story, we do know that she will be serving, of course, those 2 years behind bars there. And yeah, we've been giving you some of the updates. Let's just have a look at the details there.
Oh, it doesn't matter. I know what this happens all the time. All the time. The judges are terrible. I'm so sick of it.
Yeah. I'm looking here.
Let me deal with it.
I'm looking here.
Okay, listen to me now. Okay, I hear what you say. Just let her calm down. I'll deal with it. I understand how you feel. I'm not going to allow her to talk to you.
Every single person that answers the phone is a black person, and they are.
Let's walk away from it. I'll deal with it. Can I have a word with you, please?
I'm going to order work.
Can we walk that side?
I don't want to do a video call because I want the evidence.
Extravaganza.
You would answer one of the 50 calls that I made. Instead, I get sued to these people that just go, I don't know what, you know, I can't stand it. I am so sick of it.
First of all, I need to explain.
Listen, yeah, I'm not going to change my mind. I hate the If you people were going to assist, you would have done it a half an hour ago. Well, there's not, I can tell you now, the caliber of blacks in this town vary from the caliber of blacks in Durban. They're opinionated, they're arrogant, and they just plain and simple. I'm happy for a white person to assist me, or a coloured person, or a Indian person. I do not want a black person to assist me.
What we need to do is I'm trying to assist
you. Let me tell you something. This is the type of police force we've got. We've got low caliber people working.
You're calling me a low caliber police officer?
I do think that the business is very, very low. Can I tell you something? If I was in your shoes, I would treat someone like myself much better than what you've treated.
Asking you, did you insult me at any time? I've offered you the whole time assistance.
What assistance? What the have you offered?
Man?
Want me to?
Okay.
If I have a gun,
Ma'am, listen to me now one more time. I'm not going to say it again.
Go away, I don't need your help.
In front of witnesses, this is what she said to me. She doesn't need our help. I've been standing here for quite some time now.
If you wanted to help me, you would have helped me half an hour.
Sir, I'm not going to argue with her. I'm not going to entertain this. When you stopped here, she insulted my colleague. She called this constable a black. Okay?
No, I didn't. I said I don't want to deal with any.
Ma'am?
And I'm not prepared to deal with any. I've just been smashed and grabbed with a car.
You better tell her. If she doesn't want to get arrested, she must come down.
Go away.
I've offered my service. I've offered to assist her numerous occasions. She doesn't calm down. She doesn't want to.
Yeah, well, of course, that is our question. Do you think that the 2-year sentence handed down to racist Vicki Malmberg is fair? Let's have a look at some of the tweets. Seeing that video compilation for the very first time in over a couple of years, and the sound coming through from a very, very angry woman. Well, Bagomia says it's not even a pain to the person who consigns that word. It brings nightmares of the past. Mcleba says 3 years was fair, 1 year suspended was merciful. And Gakiso says, nope, I think a lot of racist things are being said through the media. That's a slap on the shoulder. People like those should rot in jail, and they should add 3 more years. Well, that's a wrap-up of that breaking story. Continuing with the breaking news throughout the course of this morning, Steve Smith and David Warner, the former captain and vice-captain of the Australian cricket team, have been banned for 1 year. Cricket Australia has also banned Cameron Bancroft, who actually did the ball tampering that has rocked the team in the recent days, for 9 months. They are all scheduled to leave South Africa today and have been replaced ahead of the 4th and final test in Johannesburg. Tim Payne has been handed the captaincy. Smith is expected to speak publicly for the very first time since admitting the plan to tamper with the ball during the 3rd test. He'll be speaking about that when he arrives home in Sydney. For more reaction, we are now joined in our studio by SABC News Sports editor Janet Whitted. Very good morning to you, Janet. Thank you very much for joining us. Do you think the ban for, the 1 year and the 9 months was sufficient? Was it enough?
Yes, I think it was. According to the rules of the ICC, which is the world governing body for cricket, it's actually not a terribly serious offence. I think the reason that this story has become as big as it has is because of the fact that it was planned ahead of time, which I think is fairly unusual, and because the plan involved the senior leadership of the team. There's been speculation over the last couple of days over who exactly that leadership is. They have fingered both Steve Smith and David Warner for that, and subsequently Cricket Australia have taken it upon themselves to take that kind of action. And I think this was probably the kind of action that was more or less what was expected. Cameron Bancroft has been regarded on a certain level as a victim in this, because it was the senior members of the team. He's the youngest member of the team. They asked him to do something. It's that kind of power relationship that they took advantage of, which is why his suspension is for slightly less time. I think it probably is fair because the whole incident itself has shaken up cricket a lot.
Yeah. Well, that being said, it seems to have put a dark cloud over the Australian cricket team. Also, our play against South Africa. When you're playing against Australia, we're playing against the heavyweights, the heavy boys. What does this now mean, in terms of their credibility going forward?
This has been a really ugly tour on a certain level, because even before this incident, there was all of the biting that was going on between the two teams, and the incidents that involved Kagiso Rabada. David Warner has been centrally involved in all of that. And he is actually the interesting case here, because he's the vice captain of the team, and he didn't front up at the beginning of this. But there's been speculation all along that he was actually the person who formulated the plan, if you like. And certainly the Australian media have that impression that David Warner is the bad guy in all of this, that Steve Smith just wasn't a strong enough personality to tell him to back off and to stop it from happening. But also the other part of this, where the credibility of the Australian team and Cricket Australia does come into question, is the fact that Cricket Australia have let off coach Darren Lehmann completely. They say he wasn't involved. And there's a twofold problem with that. First of all, if you listen to the Australian media, certainly at last night's press conference, none of them believe he wasn't involved. But let's give him the benefit of the doubt and say he wasn't. As the coach of the team, he should have known what was going on. And on top of that, it's been since he was there that this culture of win at all costs, and if it means pushing the line, has been engendered in that Australian team. And that's a problem. And I think this is a wake-up call, not just to Australia, but to world cricket in general. But that, you know what, guys, you've been pushing the envelope for too long now. It's time to back off and get back to playing cricket the way it was supposed to be played.
In terms of having a look at the response, immediately a response not only from Cricket South Africa but also the Prime Minister saying that as soon as the boys come back home they will be brought to book. Let's have a look at how Australia as a country has actually been dealing with this.
Very badly. They've taken it very to heart. It's almost as if they're really hurt by that. And I think that in order to understand the depth and the strength of that reaction, you've got to understand what cricket means in Australia. There's a common saying in Australia that the captain of the Australian cricket team is second in importance in the country only to the Prime Minister, Malcolm Turnbull, in this situation. That's how important cricket is in Australia. It is the widest followed sport in the country, and they are the highest paid sportsmen in that country. So they're kind of put on this pedestal, and I think that the fact that they've been pushed right off that pedestal has really kind of got to Australians. They suddenly realize, is this the kind of people that we really are? I think they've reacted to it because it's so much more than just a sports incident. It talks to what kind of people the Australians are, and they've been hurt by what their cricket leaders have done.
And just rounding this up, with regards to the ICC, you levelled the ban being appropriate towards the ICC legislation or rules and regulations. Can you just give us a brief summary around that?
I think the ICC are going to have to take a long, hard look at themselves, and that might be the good that comes out of this rather sorry story. The ICC level charges only against Cameron Bancroft and Steve Smith. They were the two that went up front on Saturday evening and said and admitted what they've done. Steve Smith was banned for the fourth test, which starts at the Wanderers on Friday anyway, because that's the rules. That's what the rules state should have happened. Bancroft was charged with a level 2 offence, which gave him 3 demerit points, which doesn't ban him for a test match. So if Australia hadn't withdrawn him from the team, he could have played this weekend. Okay. So the ICC rules, as far as this is concerned, are quite lenient. They've followed them to the letter, and I think what they're going to have to look at is, are those rules actually strong enough? And sometimes they need to be able to look outside the letter of the law and say, okay, this is a bigger picture than just this. The ICC has to look not just at the laws of cricket, but the way in which they are enforced. And I think that's going to be something that Dave Richardson's going to have to get the organisation to do in the coming months.
Definitely. Thank you very much for joining us here, SABC News Sports Editor Janet Witten, giving us the details around the banning there of the captain as well as vice captain of the Australian cricket team. Let's have a look at some other news this morning. Well, President of the Patriotic Alliance, Gayton McKenzie, says his party will not support a motion of no confidence in a man when the only apparent basis for it is that he happens to be white. McKenzie has announced that the PA will not support tomorrow's EFF motion of no confidence in the DA mayor in the Nelson Mandela Bay Metro, Athol Trollip. The EFF brought the motion following the DA's rejection of the recent bill for land expropriation without compensation, with EFF leader Julius Malema citing Trollip's race. Asanda Ntama had the details. The Economic Freedom Fighters leader Julius Malema is also set to address supporters in PE ahead of the party's vote of no confidence against Athol Trollip later today. Meanwhile, the DA supporters are expected to come out in full force at the rally in front of the City Hall to show support for the mayor ahead of the vote of no confidence tomorrow. Well, continuing, we do know that the vote of confidence in the Nelson Mandela Bay Metro at the Trollip is set only for tomorrow, and it could backfire for the EFF as the Patriotic Alliance wants Trollip to stay in charge. In the latest statement released by the party, they will support the DA in the motion during the council meeting scheduled for tomorrow. This will result in the votes being deadlocked at 60 between the DA and the ANC alliances. The DA speaker would then have the deciding vote. SABC News also earlier spoke to political analyst Ongama Mtika on the issue.
It seems like there's been quite a successful, lobbying of at least one of the political parties that have got one seat in council, and that's all that the DA needs to at least survive. 61 seats is a comfortable majority, but what the situation will be now, assuming everybody else remains in the positions they have communicated, we will have a situation where there's a split right in the middle, and the Constitution does allow the Speaker to then have a casting vote, which then will tilt things favorably for Ethel Trollip because the Speaker comes from his same party.
Now, there's no secret that the PA have been gunning that deputy mayoral position, and there has been talks, for several months now that the PA will swing whichever party to ensure that they get that seat. Now, do you think that the talks or the rumblings behind the scenes, it is possible that the Marlon Daniels, who holds the seat in council, could possibly secure that deputy mayoral position as well as MMC for roads and transport?
Well, either that or a deal too sweet to refuse was offered to them, because if we recall, it was Marlon Daniels who led the process of removing the former deputy mayor Mongameli Bobani, and he then got in to be in the mayoral committee. But in no time, the relationship kind of broke down because they had their eyes, or the Patriotic Alliance that is, on the deputy mayoral position. And when the DA failed to kind of live up to that expectation, the relationship broke down, and the parties then wanted to recall Ethel Trollip, and the EFF actually came to the party there and saved him. So this time, I think they have gotten what they wanted, the Patriotic Alliance. But I also think that the relationship between Gayton McKenzie and Julius Malema at a national level cannot be underestimated in terms of what role it is playing, because I saw, for example, in the messaging of Gayton McKenzie that they kept emphasizing that the EFF didn't engage them at a national level, and because of the recent sort of animosity that has been there, you would have expected that precisely because there's been throughout national and local coordination, and local guys have always voted according to the script. It was common sense, for the EFF to try and engage everybody else, but also thinks this also points to perhaps the lax attitude the ANC has had, and also its readiness to actually lead the process here. And for a stability point of view, it might actually be working better for the people of Nelson Mandela Bay, not because of the political party that is there, but because of possible stability in the future. Because the ANC locally is in tatters, and it was going to battle to actually retain a united force between City Hall and Florence Matomela House.
Well, continuing with that live build-up, we now cross back to our reporter, Jade Lee-Polsa, just coming to us now live from PE. A very noisy square. I'm also seeing in the backdrop there a hands-off for Ethel Trollip. Very good morning to you once again. Jade, take us through what the mood is like as we await that vote of no confidence in Ethel Trollip that has been brought forward.
Yes, hello to you once again, Shante. I am coming to you live from the City Hall, where, as you can see, there's a sea of blue. If I can just step out of the shot there. Several supporters of Ethel Trollip as well as DA members have come out in their numbers to support their mayor, who they believe has brought change in Nelson Mandela Bay. They have several placards, hands off Ethel Trollip, stop racism and support Ethel. And this is all in light of that motion of no confidence that has been brought by the EFF and that will take place tomorrow. But with me, I do have the Nelson Mandela Bay Mayor, Ethel Trollip, and he's going to be chatting to us more about that statement that was released by the Patriotic Alliance leader, Gayton McKenzie, last night. Good morning, Ethel. Good afternoon, rather.
Hello, Jade. How are you?
Ethel, obviously we've seen, this metro being highly contested. We know that the PA over several months now have really wanted to sink their teeth into that deputy mayor position. But now there seems to be a tide or change of tide. What exactly transpired behind the scenes? Because I think many people want to know what were the terms and conditions of the PA, supporting the DA ahead of that motion of no confidence.
Well, Jade, first of all, we've had experience working with
with the Patriotic Alliance. We had negotiations when they came onto our coalition. Initially, they demanded the position of Deputy Mayor. I couldn't provide that because there was still a lot of indecision about what was happening with Mongameli's Babani's court case around that position. And I couldn't make a commitment to give them the position whilst there was still controversy around that position. They came on board and worked with us really well for a couple of months, and then when we decided that we were going to do away with the position rather than have the position because it was being really controversial, the Patriotic Alliance didn't like that and they pulled out. Now, what I appreciate about that is that every discussion I've ever had with Gayton McKenzie has been rather frank and straightforward. And when he pulled out, he didn't slag the DA off, he didn't slander us, didn't say terrible things about me as an individual, as the party. We just parted ways. I think what precipitated this new cooperation is that the contents of the statements made by Julius Malema and the reasons given why I had to be replaced were found to be anathema by the PA as well as the Democratic Alliance. South Africans have turned their back on racial polarization. We don't want to be divided along racial lines. We're much better together. And if you read Gayton McKenzie's letter, that is the essence. He said on the strength of that, the PA could not align with the other opposition parties that were supporting the ANC and the EFF. And most tellingly, he called the ANC out for not speaking out against this, because this is a city named after Nelson Mandela. He was the icon of reconciliation. He promoted all the races in this country coming together, and yet we have the ANC and the EFF collaborating together to remove a mayor on the strength of their race. Julius Malema himself said, "I'm not corrupt, I'm not doing a bad job, it's just the throat of my whiteness that needs to be cut." Now, that is unacceptable because it's incendiary, it's inflammatory, and can be taken out of context by people. So we believe that the Patriotic Alliance is aligned with us on very important basic principles and values. And if you have a coalition agreement with a party that agrees with your basic values, then it can work, and I believe it can work. I made a commitment to Gayton after reading his letter that is the kind of South Africa that I would like to build, and I'm committed to building it with him. And he said he had no doubt about my intentions.
I think one of the questions on everyone's lips is the fact that we know that Gayton McKenzie is quite controversial in the media, as well as the party itself in the northern areas. But how does a party like DA affiliate themselves with a party like the PA?
Well, the affiliation is made easier if you read the contents of that letter. Now, Gayton McKenzie also wrote an open letter to Julius Malema 4 years ago. There's a lot of consistency but what he said 4 years ago about Julius Malema and what he's saying today in this letter. What we've seen with the EFF is there's no consistency. Julius Malema changes his mind on almost every subject. Since he was in the Youth League and now as the Commander-in-Chief of the EFF, he changes his mind on almost every single important subject in South Africa. Now, one thing about Gayton McKenzie, he is controversial. Nobody has to tell you that. He'll tell you himself. He's written a book about his life. Yes, he has been a gangster. He was incarcerated. He was in prison. He's paid his price. He's come out and he's promoted children to stay away from a life of crime. He goes to speak in prisons. So I think he has been rehabilitated, and he has shown that he wants to lead a life of more example than he has been in the past. There's nothing wrong with that. We support rehabilitation of criminals, and I like the fact that there's some consistency about this man. And obviously we'll have to build a relationship. I told him that our relationship, there's been a breakdown in trust between Marlon Daniels and myself, and that will have to be rebuilt. I was very unambiguous about that with him and Marlon, and we're going to work at it. But what I liked about what he says is the kind of South Africa we want to build. That aligns with where we are.
And then looking at Marlon Daniels, I mean, we know that he's been gunning you several times in council, but how are the other smaller parties such as the AIC going to take to this now? How are they going to support you? Have you spoken to them?
Look, we've been speaking to all the smaller parties a lot, and obviously they come under a lot of pressure as well, get made all sorts of offers. I know about the inducements that have been offered. A lot of them have been financial. We're not prepared to make financial inducements. I think those individual parties are going to have to take a decision, because whatever they align with today, there will be long-term consequences. So if they don't take decisions in council based on day-to-day issues around governance and passing budgets and adjustment budget, if they turn their back on those things, the voters are going to turn their backs on them. We serve in council to represent voters. Voters want us to govern. They want us to govern properly, corruption-free, open government. They want service delivery to take place. And those that prevent service delivery taking place in the council chamber are not representing themselves or their jackets. They're representing voters out there. And voters will punish them if they don't take interest in their decisions in their interest.
And then lastly, Athol, obviously you guys will be marching at 12 o'clock, but looking at that vote of no confidence tomorrow, now that you have have that, vote from the PA. Are you feeling more comfortable? Do you think that you'll survive that motion of no confidence?
Look, I don't ever take anything for granted in politics. I just have had a feeling for a long time that sanity is going to prevail here and that people will take decisions based on the best interest of all the people in the city. The Patriotic Alliance's stance is an endorsement of that. We'll see what will happen in the council tomorrow. I've always said from the outset of Julius Malema's statement that saying one thing and getting it done in a legislative environment is different. And we saw with Jacob Zuma, he survived 8 or 9 votes of no confidence because people just blindly did what their parties told them to do. Now, I believe some of the parties are going to instruct their members what to do tomorrow. It won't be about their personal choices. It'll be about what their parties instruct them to do. Because political parties have to survive. And if you cut your own throat, now that we're talking about the metaphor of cutting throats, if political parties cut their own throats, they've got nobody else to blame but themselves.
Thank you very much for your time, Athol. That was the Mayor of Nelson Mandela Bay, Athol Trollip, talking about the political arena that's happening here ahead of that motion of no confidence, no confidence against him tomorrow. But he also said that, he's calling on the smaller parties in council to actually come to the fore, come to the plate, and actually help him stay in office. It's back to you in studio.
Thank you very much, Jadely Pulser down in Port Elizabeth for SABC News. On that note, we take a short break. Do stay tuned to SABC's Newsroom.
A warm welcome to one of your favorite weekly review analysis programs, Media Monitor. So let's look at the race itself.
It's just becoming a personality contest where people just want somebody to guard their own vested interest. And I feel that the country is at a point now where we need some sort of change.
It is ANC policy that they will have to implement.
We fairly know the direction the ANC wants to take. As a leader, you have to implement.
So what was it like on the ground in Kenya?
Well, the country is divided. The country is very divided.
I think within the country, for me, the one person that I criticize severely, and I'm not very happy with his approach, is Raila Odinga, with him pulling out.
Stay tuned to Media Monitor and catch on analysts unpacking top stories every Sunday from 9 a.m. Our stories.
How do I begin?
Our lives. When all seems to fail, we will raise our voices a bit louder for our justice.
I went into absolute shock. My whole body was shaky. I couldn't hold a phone, but there he was. I couldn't believe the nonchalant that they were still in the area 2 weeks later.
And in times when the justice system is not able to help us with our individual battles.
I'm willing to do anything. What are you doing? Nothing. Feeling sorry for yourself? No, it's not an option.
These are our stories on Cutting Edge Channel 404.
Welcome back. Well, on the backdrop of one of our breaking stories this morning, we've been asking the question, do you think that the 2-year jail sentence handed to Vicki Malmberg is fair? Let's have a look at some of your tweets there that have already come through with regards to reaction. Tabo says it's highly welcomed as long as it's a direct imprisonment so that others can learn from it. Muketsu says yes, simple. He seems to see that it's fair. Anela says yes, she does. This land is ours. Alrighty, so let's have a look at our poll question that we've also been running this morning. And we've been asking, the National Assembly has passed the political party funding bill. Do you support the decision? Of course, that's to make sure that we can actually see where the funds are coming from. 28% of you are saying no, 72% of you are saying yes. Just over 270 tweets coming in. Etebe says 100% support this. We want to see the caption party. And Aaron says, yes, we must support and hope it will be helpful somewhere. Yeah, thank you very much. Moving away from Twitter, let's go to our Facebook page this morning. Let's have a look at what you can find on there at SABC Newsroom. Well, it seems that 4 people have been arrested after a tip-off during a community meeting that led to the Joburg Metro Police K9 unit raiding a brothel in Diepkloof in Soweto at the weekend. And then International Relations Minister Lindiwe Sisulu will travel to Lesotho after Easter to personally go and apologize to King Letsie the third for the treatment he received at a border post between Lesotho and South Africa. And finally, the 2 warring taxi organizations in the Eastern Cape, Unsendo as well as the Border Alliance, have expressed disappointment at the police department's decision to suspend their operations on 2 major routes in the area. You can simply search for SABC Newsroom on Facebook, follow us and interact with us. Have a look at some of your sporting highlights now. Cricket Australia has come down hard on the 3 players who admitted to their roles in the ball tampering scandal on day 3 of the 3rd Test match against South Africa at Newlands in Cape Town. Well, Australian captain and vice-captain Steve Smith and David Warner have been banned from cricket for 12 months, while Cameron Bancroft, who actually committed the offence, received a 9-month sentence. All 3 players will have the right to challenge their verdicts and also the duration of their penalties. In addition, both Smith and Warner have been barred from captaining Australia for a period of 2 years. The disgraced trio are also heading back home today, 2 days before the final Test match at the Wanderers in Johannesburg. Well, Germany's unbeaten run of 22 matches has come to an end. They suffered a 1-0 loss to Brazil in Berlin last night. In other action, Spain were too good for Argentina and Madrid, winning by 6-1, while Egypt lost 1-0 to Greece.
The North Africans were looking for their first win in the international window when they took on Greece in Zurich. They lost 2-1 against Portugal in their other friendly match last Friday. Greece also lost their previous friendly encounter against Switzerland on Friday. The Greeks produced a much more encouraging performance against Egypt.
That's a teasing ball in and headed into the back of the net.
The Pharaohs were without their star player Mohamed Salah and they went down 1-0. The World Cup holders, Germany, were far from full strength at home against Brazil. Coach Joachim Löw fielded a second-string team to test the depth of the squad ahead of the World Cup. The Brazilians, on the other hand, were keen to avenge the 7-1 defeat they suffered in the semi-final of the 2014 World Cup at home. Gabriel Jesus' first half header gave Brazil a welcome confidence boost less than 3 months before the World Cup starts. In their first friendly match of the international window, Brazil defeated Russia 3-0 in Moscow.
Oh, and a chance on here, Diogo Costa!
And Spain are looking in ominous form ahead of the World Football Spectacle. They are keen to make amends for the mishaps of the 2014 event when they were unable to advance to the knockout stage. Spain were up against Argentina in a friendly match in Madrid last night. At half-time, it was 2-1 to Spain. The Spaniards were all over Argentina in the second half, with the South Americans missing their talisman Lionel Messi, who had an ankle.
It's Thiago!
Goalkeeper David De Gea also provided an assist that led to Spain's 5th goal of the match.
Caballero came, and Aspas cool enough to punish him for it. Getting embarrassing now for Argentina. It's Aspas again. Can they finish it? Oh, it's A hat-trick for Isco!
Isco completed his hat-trick as Spain pummeled Argentina 6-1.
He's seen enough, I think.
Mduduzi Ndlovu, SABC News.
Rugby Lions wing Apuwe Janki has been ruled out of the Lions Super Rugby clash against the Crusaders this Sunday. Janki, who is the top, or tied rather, for the top spot on the South African try scorers charts, alongside teammate Malcolm Marks with 5 tries, will be sidelined for up to 6 weeks with a torn pectoral muscle. It's a cruel blow for the 23-year-old who has been a revelation for the Lions in his maiden Super Rugby season. The match is a repeat of last year's final, which was won by the Crusaders 25-17, giving the Star side from New Zealand their 8th Super Rugby title. Kickoff is on Sunday, April the 1st, around 2:30. And WBA and IBF World Heavyweight Champion Anthony Joshua said he will knock Joseph Parker out when the pair meet in Cardiff on Saturday. Undefeated Briton Joshua is overwhelmingly the favourite and will have home advantage against the New Zealander in the Principality Stadium. Parker, who is unbeaten in his 24 fights and brings with him the WBO belt, said he will win against Joshua but has not decided how he wants to beat him just yet. Well, Joshua said he expects a tough fight that will go 12 rounds. Whoever wins will become a 3-belt heavyweight champion. Before we wrap things up, a very busy day in the newsroom this morning. Let's get an update on one of our breaking stories. Former real estate agent Vicki Malmberg has now been denied bail. This is upon the sentencing this morning. Our reporter Mangoba Mqunu is on the line from the Randburg Magistrates Court. Very good morning to Mangoba. What were the magistrates' reasons for denying Malmberg bail?
Of course, Shante, Malmberg has been dealt yet another blow today here at the Randburg Magistrate Court after she had tried to apply for bail. And of course, the state did oppose that application, saying that there was no law that, or according to procedure, she was not following the right steps in going about a bail application. You recall that when somebody is convicted and has to go to the holding cells or has to go behind bars, the procedure is that they first need to put in an application for leave to appeal before they can even apply for bail. But in this instance, we saw Vicki Malmberg's lawyers bringing first an application for bail and saying that they're going to go ahead with the application for leave to appeal next week, Wednesday. And according to the state, that is not procedural and that is not according to the law. And therefore, those are some of the reasons why the state had objected to this particular application. And of course, the judge also was not swayed by the defense's arguments that they needed time to consult with Vicki Malmberg and that she should be released until then she makes that application for leave to appeal. So basically, the magistrate had said that also there are no reasons that warrant Vicki Malmberg to be released on bail as she has not yet made that application for leave to appeal.
Just very briefly, any other intent on taking the matter further?
Well, certainly, Vicki Malmberg has indicated that she will file for leave to appeal next week, Wednesday, but until then she will have to remain behind bars as that ruling has now confirmed that she needs to stay behind bars until that happens. So we're hoping to hear next week, Wednesday, how things will transpire here in court. But certainly the state is saying that this is a victory for them, and certainly are calling this a landmark ruling, saying that it's for the first time that a person has actually been convicted of criminal injuria. They say that in previous cases there have been convictions, but those convictions have been aligned to other cases. So a person will be convicted on the basis that they've also assaulted on top of criminal injury. So they're saying that certainly they hope this will act as a deterrent going forward to other would-be offenders and hopefully also a precedent to similar matters like this in the future where we'll see people using the K word in particular. So certainly a victory for the state, but Vicki Malmberg also saying that she's not about to give up. She's willing to take this matter forward to appeal both the conviction and the sentence as well.
Thank you very much. Mangoba Mqunu coming to us live from the Randburg Magistrates Court on the outcomes there of Vicki Malmberg, her sentencing and also being denied bail this morning. And that is where we bring SABC Newsroom a close to this morning. Thank you very much for joining us. We do weekdays between 9 a.m. and 12 p.m. Until tomorrow. Bye.
This is your midday report. Good afternoon.
I will be free.
I assume as President of the Republic of Kenya.
Let's take a look at how African markets and currencies are performing now.
The central bankers say the success of Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies is just a bubble.
Breaking stories, detailed economy